بشم آب وابر الروح القديس وحاد الله شاريره آمين.
Hello, everyone. Those people who are tuning in right now and coming into the stream. Today, we're going to respond to a live stream probably 2 months ago from Craig Truglia. It was on our church regarding whether we have, canonical succession, whether we have the marks of a schismatic church, who really maintains the true apostolic succession after the Chalcedonian Schism. They're going to be addressing his claims. It took a while to make this. We were pretty lazy on making this. Some people wanted to see it, but it really wasn't that many people wanting to see a response. Most people could intuitively see a lot of the claims were oversaturated from Craig. So we took our time to respond. Hopefully, it's going to be a fruitful response. Let's see if Craig is willing to respond. But the reason why we're doing it now is Craig recently went on Cleave to Antiquity stream, and now he's trying to publicize some of these arguments. And then that was taken by Orthodox Kyle, and then Simple Orthodoxy responded to his video, and then apparently Kyle responded back to that. So if they're going to start relying on these niche arguments, it's fitting that we give a response. Today, I'm with Subdeacon Daniel. You guys know him. His channel's The Lion's Den. I'm going to put his channel in the description when we're done. Same with Simply Canonical, aka Simple Orthodoxy. I'll put his channel as well. And we have a new guest. His name is Moss. Moss, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, it's great to be on. It's a pleasure. I go by Moss. Some of you may know me online. And yeah, I'm really stoked to be here. We spent about 3 to 4 weeks preparing for this video, a document about 75 pages long. This stream is going to be, it's going to be really comprehensive, really extensive. Minute by minute, we're going to do a dissection of all the claims that Craig has made, all the slander, all the lies that he told on our church, and God willing, all of it comes to light today.
Amen. What do you guys have prepared? We're going to stream the video?
Yes, I'm just going to share my screen here.
Actually, Moss, if you don't mind, real quickly.
Yes.
Just so I could give a brief background to what Craig has claimed. Okay, so Agen summarized it pretty nicely, but I have a few slides here. We're not going to do too many slides. I just wanted to do a few slides here and there for like some of the critical points that really just destroy Craig's entire argument. But so Craig began to already describe himself as a sort of historian and scholar going through the facts here. So, our task here is basically to, as always, defend Oriental Orthodoxy. So just so you guys know, for those who aren't so familiar, church canons or church rules and laws for times like, for example, ordinations of bishops or for cases where bishops are allowed or not allowed to do things. These are rules that the church has set for certain conditions and cases. So here, Craig has actually accused us of breaking all of the critical ones and therefore made our church invalid by those same canons that we all hold to. So think the first three councils like Nicaea, Constantinople, Ephesus, they all had these rules, laws, and regulations that they set, and some were major. For example, Nicaea said, "You shall make no other creed than this one," right? But obviously, we never read these laws exactly to a T. J. Dyer himself will often say that when we read these canon laws, some of them don't apply over time. It's the spirit of the law. It's the spirit of the canon, not the actual words. For example, a canon will be like, bishops cannot ride horses because riding horses was like royalty. And this was sort of a lack of humility in doing so. Obviously, that doesn't really apply today. How many bishops do you see even in horses or on horses? So it doesn't make any sense. So off the bat, we are going to go into this and refute Craig. And yeah, basically that's it. Mossy, if you want to share before we get into it.
I want to add something for this intro. For people who have been paying attention on this channel for a bit, you guys would know I debated Craig Truglia a couple months back. Subdeacon was there. A very, very fun debate. Let's just say that it was one of my favorite debates I've done. It was so fun that I got copyright striked when I re-uploaded it on my channel. And Craig never made any of these arguments during the debate. I wish he did. He probably didn't have them at the time. or he did have him, but was, I don't know, didn't think it would land. Whatever it may be. After the debate, he tried to, according to what he said on Twitter, win some battles, to damage control the debate, because he thinks even if he quote unquote loses a debate, he always wins in the end. So we had a lengthy discussion on St. Ambrose's Christology. We did live streams back and forth on that. He tried to argue St. Gary, the theologian, rejected one nature. He got refuted by an Eastern Orthodox publishing company. He tried to debate me afterwards on St. Proclus's homilies, whether they teach two natures. Subdeacon was involved with that. We corrected him on what the text says. He never issued any apology. He never issued any comments. He never removed any of the comments from the past. So now we have new arguments to deal with. This is really the context of our dealings with Craig. He's a cool guy. He's a respectable person. There's no hate going out to him at all. It's been a little shaky back and forth with some of our responses. He's been upset that I pick his character. So we'll try not to talk about his character much here, even though he did slander in very dishonest ways. Other than that, we won't really mention his character. So let's get started. Do we have green on?
Yeah, just 1 second.
It was more fun to watch, the people are saying. I hope so.
I mean,
I would imagine.
Kyle thought so too. He recommended it. And honestly, for all of the EO viewers, watch it, please. If you think Craig did well, go for it. Like, go watch it. I analyze it. I don't care.
All right.
Ready?
This is going to address his video he did. It's also going to address the one he did with Cleaver, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
And Erhan brought up a point in one of their videos that we already replied to. So so it's gonna just address the question, hopefully once and for all, because in my opinion, as a student of history, I don't think there is a debate about this, and I think any question about it is revisionism.
You're absolutely right, Subdeacon. And the viewers will see as we go through this stream, Craig relies on lies. He relies on misquotations, and we'll get there. We'll get there. But can everybody see my screen? I just want to check.
Put it right now. Now we can see.
All right. So we're gonna skip to the first 10 minutes is introduction, so we can skip about right here.
In the city. Now, in the Arian controversy and the schisms, there's some odd stereotypes out there. So I'm going to counter those and push back a little bit and say the Nicene side didn't create schisms. We don't have examples of this. Like, for example, yes, there's a second bishop of Alexandria, second bishop of Antioch, but Meletius and Athanasius, right, the Nicene bishops, were the majority of their own synods. We're going to find that's actually very important because that's a canonical standard for vindicating who's the correct metropolitan or patriarch. All right. They had the majority of their own synods, which implies their elections were legitimate, canonically speaking. The parallel episcopacy is among those who are elected by the minority, right, like Paulinus of Antioch. And it's all parallel to the majority choice. So we're going to have to pay attention to this because this is what's true during the Arian controversy. What is true after Chalcedon? This is very important.
All right, Simple. Do you mind responding to this short section over here?
Yeah. So right off the bat, he implies that election of bishop or whatever it is always by the majority. So whatever the majority of bishops say, therefore that's truth. Obviously, even from the Bible, it doesn't make sense. When the majority of Israelites made an idol and forced Aaron to make this idol, were they correct in this? Right? It was the majority of people in 1 Samuel when they asked for a king. Were they correct in asking a king just because there's majority, there's numbers? Right off the bat, the majority of even Arians were a lot of Chalcedonians, especially Eastern Chalcedonians, Eastern so-called Orthodox, always complain against Catholics when they say, you guys just say big church, and then they use the same argument against us for some reason. So yeah, right off the bat, that has nothing to do with what is canonical, is number or how many bishops there are.
Yeah, excellent point. I just want to expand on that a little bit. So his standard, and you guys will notice, his standard changes drastically over the course of this video. So first he's saying that being the majority in one's own synod is a canonical standard for vindicating who the correct metropolitan or patriarch is. And he says this implies that their elections are legitimate, canonically speaking. He's saying the parallel episcopacy is among those who are elected by the minority parallel to the majority. So not only do the historic non-Chalcedonian sees were they elected by the majority as opposed to the imperially enforced minority, but the sole reliance on this standard and this standard alone is an absolutely flawed measure of canonicity for three reasons. Number one, it's a double-edged sword as it illegitimatizes instances of Chalcedonian episcopacies as parallel. Number two, it's baseless as a measure of validity in the early church. And number three, of course, as Simple brought up a little bit, the Holy Bible preaches against it and its sole reliance. For example, we look at Exodus 23 verse 2, it says, "You shall not follow a crowd to do evil, nor shall you testify in a dispute so as to turn aside after many to pervert justice." Now take a minute and think how this verse parallels the events at Chalcedon, the actions of Juvenal, Saint Dioscorus, and his trial, right? Who is this evil crowd? Who's following this crowd? How is justice being perverted? And through what testimony is false witness for? Additionally, in Numbers 13 to 14, we have 10 out of the 12 spies sent by Moses reporting in fear of the defenses of the land, which influenced the Israelites to back down and, of course, transgress God's command. And as we know, this led to 40 years of wandering. Simple talked about how in Exodus 32, the Israelites created a golden calf to worship, and Aaron succumbed to the pressure of the majority, which led to idolatry and disobeying God's commandments. Additionally, you have 1 Samuel 15, where King Saul was commanded by God to destroy the Amalekites, but he spared them instead, right? He listened to his people, the majority. And what happened after this? His kingship was rejected. We also have several examples in the Bible of prophets being a minority who are steadfast in the face of the evil majority. In Genesis 6 to 9, when Noah built his ark, he saved only him and his family. But he was mocked and ridiculed by the wicked majority, who, of course, as we know, were wiped off from the face of the earth. In Joshua 24, Joshua made a covenant at Shechem, where he gathered all the tribes of Israel, telling them to choose for themselves who they serve, the gods of their fathers or God. And he clearly stated that for him and his house, he will serve the Lord regardless of the choice made by the tribes of Israel. Even in 1 Kings 18, when Elijah gathered all of Israel on Mount Carmel, he was the sole remaining prophet of the Lord. He challenged 450 prophets of Baal, yet the Israelites sided with Elijah, the minority. And this theme continues in the New Testament even. When we look at Matthew 7, 13 to 14, "Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in it by it. Because narrow is gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it." Additionally, in Matthew 24, 9 to 13, "Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold." All right. Would anyone like to add anything, or should we continue the stream?
I want to add a point. Having majority of people can be a good sign, but like you said, relying on that as the basis for canonicity is the most ridiculous thing ever. Number one, no canon explicitly regulates it the way Craig is going to do the rest of this live stream. Secondly, the times when it is brought up, the make or break principle is never rested on that. So like a good example, Epistle 51 of St. Cyprian. He goes through how Pope Cornelius, he had the testimony of the clergy, had the testimony of the people who were then present. But the issue that they claim about Novatius isn't that Novatius solely isn't a bishop because he didn't have the majority. It's that you have Cornelius was already bishop first. And I quote, "Whoever now wishes to become a bishop must needs be made from without." Why? "After the first, there cannot be a second. Whoever is made after one who ought to be alone is not second to him, but is in fact none at all." So you cannot rest majority as your whole principle. The passages where we do learn that from, they don't even do that when they do mention having, the testimony of all the people. The make or break principle is really if you were set up as the bishop and you have the judgment of God and of Christ, those are the words of Cyprian. If anybody tries to be bishop while you yourself are still standing in that place, it can't work.
All right. Yeah, great points. Let's continue the stream.
Now, I'm going to say this in quotation marks. We're going to get into depositions, and there's a canonical way to do depositions, but the problem is there's no canon delineated whether or not, let's say, the deposition of Athanasius was correct or not. There is no canon on it, but there is a tradition that's effectually canonical, right? Because we've had many patriarchal depositions and recognitions, so to say, that form an authoritative tradition. Just like the sinlessness of the Theotokos, there's no canon and no ecumenical council on that question, but that's authoritative for us. So is this question of how to properly depose and recognize a patriarch. So with Polycrates of Ephesus and Victor of Rome, the world recognized Polycrates and the Ephesian Patriarchy. And so this is a precedent in the 2nd century. We have St. Cornelius of Rome, the Pope, and Novatian, who's the real Bishop of Rome, because both claim to be consecrated Bishop of Rome. Well, the majority of the Roman Synod accepted Cornelius. The world received Cornelius' letter. The world rejected Novatian, which is why Novatian then went and appointed other bishops. So we have a tradition there which vindicates the majority choice. We have St. Athanasius versus the world. As St. Jerome says, Athanasius versus the world. But the reality is that whoever was against Athanasius never had the world's patriarchs recognizing him. But with Athanasius, he did have the world's patriarchs recognize him before his disputed depositions. He never had a consensus deposition. You need all the patriarchs to depose a patriarch. You can't just do it with one or two. And so particularly Rome, but also Jerusalem, they were very supportive of Athanasius, and that kind of shielded him from the machinations of Constantinople. We also have Meletius versus Paulinus, which is a good example where neither in their lifetimes ever got the consensus of anyone, but Meletius, after death, through St. Flavian, eventually got the recognition of everyone, which shows you which side was vindicated, the side where all the patriarchates recognized that particular patriarch. And so
if you can pause right here, Moss.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, I want to go through each of those examples because this is hilarious.
Yeah, definitely.
For Polycrates and Victor, you have the world only saying, Victor, you messed up for trying to break the unity of the church. All of the synods had agreed with Victor, according to Eusebius. They all agreed on that specific date. So that very example fails. Number 2, Cornelius and Novatian. I just read out the letter. Thank God he got into this. I didn't even know this. Number 3, Athanasius and the world. This one is the funniest one. Why do you think Athanasius went to the West? Because Julius's letter lists like 18, like that's an exaggeration, but like 10 or so Eastern provinces that kicked their bishops out and sided with the Eusebian faction. Like the Eusebians were objectively the majority in the East. That's why everyone from the East went to the West. And if you want to unpause, I'll get the quote. But last thing, Meletius and Paulinus, he himself said during their actual dispute, there was no majority. St. Jerome's letter 15, he basically says that in the East, Christ's robe is being torn. And in letter 16, he says, they're all claiming some sort of communion with Damasus, but it's still such a big deal that you can't discern the truth in the East. That's the whole theme of letter 15. You can't discern the truth in the East. So you can keep it playing. I'll go get the quote real quick from Julius's letter to the Eusebians, where he lists all of the Eastern provinces that pretty much got kicked out and were standardizing Eusebian policies in those locations.
No, I think this is a great point to pause. Simple. You want to cover some of these examples as well?
Yeah. I mean, we can go from the beginning. We have like a bunch of examples. Like, for example, if you go through, Agen already covered like Polycrates and Novatian and Athanasius, right? Craig, even like when he blunders, he says like, you need all the patriarchs to depose a patriarch. You can't just do it with one or two, right? This standard is not found anywhere in the early church. For example, we can list multiple, like Paul of Samosata, who was obviously deposed by his own synod without the consent of the patriarchs of Alexandria and Rome. They only were told about the matter. Or Macedonius of Constantinople, who was deposed by another regional synod, orchestrated by the Acacian bishops and Emperor Constantinus II. No consent. There was no majority. Nestorius was famously deposed at Ephesus without the consent of John of Antioch. But you do not challenge this deposition as invalid for this reason. The same thing with, we can keep going on. Maximus II of Antioch was deposed. We don't know much about these circumstances, but we do know that a regional council from representatives from all the sees, all coming together, consenting, they all have to consent on it, right? Like Craig implies must be the standard. And even like Pope Felix, who initiated the Acacian Schism, when his synod in Rome attempted to depose 3 patriarchs, so Antioch, Alexandria, and Constantinople, Craig probably wouldn't even bat an eye at this, right? St. Peter the Fuller, one of our saints, was deposed several times, once by Felix III, the rest by the emperors, but these aren't invalid depositions, right? Because double standard. Acacius of Constantinople was also deposed by the same Felix at his synod, but I mean, Antioch and Alexandria, they didn't agree, but we don't care about that. Peter Mogus is deposed by Felix. Like, you have this one person deposing all of these people, right? But we just forget about that. And Evagrius cites all of these examples.
I just want to make sure I can't believe that Craig is making this argument, because he should know. So maybe I'm misunderstanding. So I want to ask you guys to make sure that this is the argument that he's making. He's saying that the see has to have a majority. That's what he's saying.
I wish that was what he was saying. He's saying that in order to depose a patriarch, you need the consent of all other patriarchs. He goes so far, like the examples that he listed, his standard is changing time and time again. Like, once he says, oh, we need the consent of the world. Oh, but now actually we need just the consent of our own synod. His standard is changing, flip-flopping, but the most absurd one, the one that
he's patriarch, or to depose a bishop of a see?
To depose a patriarch. He's saying we need the consent of everyone. We need Alexandria on board. We need Antioch on board. We need.
But there are so many examples in history that's not what.
Yes, I know it's completely bogus. And simple. You want to cover some of the other examples as well?
Yeah, like more examples of this. We have.
How about John of Antioch not agreeing on 431? How about that?
Yeah. That was literally like the one of the examples as well. Like, even with Nestorius, like, he didn't agree with that. Like, we just invalidate that.
He didn't. Nestorius was out because of the emperor. 2 years later, John of Antioch signs.
Yeah. Yep.
So the deposition was invalid until 433,
according to Craig. Yeah.
Well, he's not qualifying it and saying, well, unless it's a council. He's not, like, I don't understand.
Nope, he's not. And we actually have in history 2 examples of the standards so this was from the Acacian Schism. We had an argument between Rome and Constantinople on the topic of the deposition of St. Acacius. So Rome was arguing St. Acacius was rightfully deposed because each ecumenical council can only depose a heresy once. And so St. Acacius was deposed according to association for a subscription of Eutychianism. But the Constantinopolians, the defenders of Acacius, they were saying, no, we need a council to depose a patriarch. So these are the 2 viewpoints that we have. Craig is disagreeing with both of these historic viewpoints. He's saying we need every patriarch on board. We need the consent of every patriarch in order to depose a patriarch. Complete foolishness, completely unfounded, completely baseless.
I know where Craig's getting this from, to give him some kind of defense. This is how Craig deals with papal claims after Chalcedon. If you read Valentinian III's edict, not an edict, but basically a rule passed, mentions Leo by name, saying you can't do anything without your ruler. You have the same passage in Socrates and Sosiman talking about an ancient canon. You cannot depose anyone without the Bishop of Rome. It's repeated again at Nicaea II. It's repeated by Peter Chrysologus about Leo. So all of these post-Chalcedonian claims, starting 440 onwards, once Leo became Pope, saying you can't depose anyone without Rome. And what's Truglia's solution to this? Oh yeah, you can't depose anyone without Rome because Rome is a patriarch and you need all the patriarchs. So if you're missing one patriarch, you can't depose them. That's his thought process. It's a dealing with there's papacy in my tradition cope. And that's where he gets this made up ecclesiology that has no precedence in the early fathers. To go through, so we already talked about Polycrates and Victor. Everyone was siding with Victor's own position on when to actually celebrate the feast. They only sided with Polycrates, saying, Victor, we shouldn't really cut him off from the unity of the church. Okay? For Cornelius and Novatius, I already went through that Epistle 51. That the problem is that Novatius is trying to take a see while he himself is, there's already someone there. Cornelius is already there. It's a second bishop while there's already a first. For Athanasius versus the world, he made this silly claim that it actually wasn't really Athanasius versus the world. You know, all the bishops were really with Athanasius, but why do you think he went to Rome? Alexandria was hijacked by Gregory. Antioch is where the Eusebians would convene their councils, and Flaculus, who was the patriarch at the time, was pro-Eusebian. Constantinople was hijacked by Eusebius himself. The Eusebians already convened a council at Jerusalem during the days of Tyre, so they have control in Jerusalem. And from Julius's epistle, we see multiple places where a bunch of bishops are running in from here because their own places kicked them out because of Eusebian control. You have Ancyra, Thrace, Soel, Syria, Phoenicia, and Palestine. So he himself said there's no explicit canon laying out my position. He goes to see, well, you know, it's just embedded everywhere. But it's just Craig's own private reading of these matters. He's just making up an ecclesiology to deal with the papacy that exists in his tradition.
And Simple already addressed the point about Paul of Samosata. There was no patriarchs involved in this.
Yeah, Alexandria and Rome specifically, they were like, hey guys, this is what we did. They didn't ask for consent from them for deposing Paul.
I also want to bring up really quickly, and we'll keep justifying the crown of the Syrians throughout the stream. Saint Severus was deposed by Justin in 518 without a canonical synod or the consent of the patriarchs. All right, so I feel like with Chalcedonians they'll do this double standard. They're okay. It's, you know, when we do it, it's fine, but you know, Saint Severus, he was evil. He was evil.
Wait. Okay, Severus. Thank you for mentioning him. Severus 518. Who are the patriarchs who deposed Severus? Who are they?
Zero.
I want Craig to tell me. Like, okay, the patriarch of Alexandria was who in 518?
Non-existent for the Chalcedonian side.
For the Chalcedonians, non-existent. So our own patriarch of Alexandria did not. They didn't have one, unless he was the ghost of Proterius. They didn't have it. So who are these unanimous patriarchs who are deposing everyone? And when did that ever happen?
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, okay. And Subdeacon, you make a great point bringing up 518. There's something very particular about 518 that I want to expand upon.
Simple,
just another thing about 518. So this synod attempted to depose Saint Severus as well as approximately 50 other non-Chalcedonian bishops. But let me ask you a question, Subdeacon, and I guess the viewers. So if I'm the emperor, right, and I want to depose someone, is it not right for me to perhaps, you know, give a letter to my soldiers and, you know, inform the bishops that they are being deposed, inform Saint Severus that they are being deposed? This council didn't do that. Saint Severus and the 50 other non-Chalcedonian bishops that were quote unquote deposed, not a single one of them were informed. And Volker Menze, amazing scholar, he makes note of this. It's insane. It's a joke of a council.
Okay, here's another problem they have. 512, Severus becomes patriarch.
Yes.
Yeah. Craig Truglia, cleave to information. All of you guys, who is your patriarch of Antioch in 512, 513, 514, 515? Who is your patriarch of Antioch that you're in communion with? Who is he? Severus of Antioch. You're in communion with Severus of Antioch. So now in 518, when Justin just willy-nilly deposes him because you guys are papists in that year, when that happens, no other patriarchs do. You happen to recognize the deposition of your own patriarch. With that is uncanonical. I can't believe we even have to address this because it's so silly.
Yeah. I think Moss, do you want to address anything else? I think we.
I do just want to quickly cover a little bit about, or add a little bit on Athanasius versus the world. So Craig, he tries to argue, oh, eventually, right? Eventually, each of the sees accepted Athanasius, right? But for the most part, this wasn't true. So in Constantinople alone, we had 4 Arian patriarchs in succession. In Antioch, I believe we had 8 Arian patriarchs in succession. Even in Rome, right, we know Liberius was tempted to his fall and apostatized. So he's trying to claim that Rome was this, Rome never succumbed to Arianism. Rome was always, on St. Athanasius' side. That's not true at all. Even in Jerusalem, which we don't actually recognize as a patriarchate, it was elevated to the status of patriarchate at Chalcedon, right? But even in Jerusalem, St. Cyril was driven out. He was chased out of the city. So every single city of Craig's beloved pentarchy rejected St. Athanasius. His standard is garbage.
Thank you for saying this. Agen, what's the name of the Pope? Liberius? Who was the one who signed it? Liberius.
Pope Liberius.
Yes.
Okay. So Craig is his thing is blowing up in his face. Like the Pope of Rome, Liberius, and Antioch was Arian. And I don't know who else. I think Jerusalem and Constantinople, if Constantinople was even a patriarch at the time. If, like you're saying, Moss, they all condemn Athanasius, but it's Athanasius against the world. He's the right one, and they're all wrong.
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe he has trouble sleeping. And he's trying to justify it in his head. So he tries to,
All right, let us continue.
So to say, that's not a canon, but authoritative tradition before Chalcedon on that question. And it was so well known, there's a synod essentially among the Syrian Church of the East in 424 of Mark Copta, and they recognized it and took it for granted. So to quote the synod, as for what was defined by the Western Fathers, i.e. the 5 patriarchs in the Roman world, that it is not permitted for bishops to hold an assembly against their leader, nor to write charges or reproaches, but that if they have to complain and do not obtain satisfaction in the council in the presence of the patriarch, they must appeal to his colleagues, i.e. the other patriarchs, who will decide between him and them after having examined the matter. So here is a synod, a local jurisdictional synod among the Syrians, and they go, well, this is what the rest of the whole Christian world believes. Now, they were to take issue with it because they didn't want their patriarch to be appealed to the patriarch of Antioch. But this shows you they're the minority in opposing this. This was the recognized tradition of the whole Christian world. That's why these Syrians eventually went to schism. And so it's not just, oh, look, Craig's an apologist making this up out of nowhere. No, this is in the primary sources, and they took for granted this is the majority view of everybody.
Subdeacon, I see you're a little disappointed in this. Can you tell us what else that synod says?
I hope my Assyrian Church of the East brothers are watching this, because the Eastern Orthodox cannot open their mouths about us without mentioning the Assyrian Church of the East. They can't. Every single video they've made against us, somehow they bash the Assyrian Church of the East, somewhere in there. The Synod of 424 had nothing to do with the schism. They're in communion for 60 years after this. And the only reason communion was broken is because of us. We broke communion with them. So the rest of the Roman world breaks communion via Antioch. Peter the Fuller was the one to do it. Has nothing to do with the synod. He says it led to their schism. No, it didn't. That's not that. The point of that synod was that people are not, like he said, this is correct, that people are not appealing to Antioch against their patron. That's giving the benefit of the doubt that it's a legitimate synod in the first place. That's already up. There's questions about the synod, but let's give the benefit of the doubt that it's real. Okay. So it's about not appealing to Antioch over their own patriarch. That's what the synod is about. Has nothing to do with what he's saying. That's a totally unrelated topic. I don't know how he's trying to tie it in.
It gets worse. So sorry, Simple.
No,
I just want to add something.
Yeah, go ahead.
It gets worse. If you know this synod, or actually, Simple, you want to cover this part here? Well, what else does the synod say, right? So he's trying to quote this as a sort of as if it somehow supports this position of consensus of the patriarchs. But why isn't this the case, Simple?
Yeah, the first thing is I don't know if Craig did this intentionally, but it's actually like it's usually called the Synod of the Disho. I think I might be slobbering.
The Disho is the name of the patriarch.
Yeah, so when he said Mar Kopta, I didn't know what it was, but so it's actually like sometimes cited as like more supremal because it says by the word of the Trinity, no one is allowed to hold a synod against the Catholicos, nor to arouse quarrels, schism, divisions, nor to write charges or complaints against him, as was done. And then further on, it says, for no reason can one think or say that the Catholicos of the East can be judged by those below him or by a patriarch like him. How is this consensus? I mean, like, I don't know. What did Craig say? It's like, oh, Craig is making this up. Yeah, you are making this up, bro. Like, this is very, like, you would say this is papal. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, and by the way, the Disho Synod itself makes that appeal to Peter. It makes that type of Petrine claim. Just a fun fact.
Right.
Yeah, it's this trend you will notice will continue, right? Craig is quoting something that directly refutes him. We'll see some of this comedy later on, but for now, I think we can continue.
Now it gets even better than this. We have a source that is actually canonical for Oriental Orthodox today, the Feth Negest. And it is the normal canon of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and it's based upon a 13th century Coptic normal canon. It is still canon law today, as I said, for the Ethiopian Orthodox. It has an introduction written by the Selassie, how you pronounce his name, but like the king of Ethiopia, last emperor of Ethiopia. And it's cited today against the Eritreans. So the Ethiopian Orthodox still cite this document because it is their canon law. And what does it say? It says, if a patriarch is guilty of some offense, no proceeding may take place, that's their brackets, not mine, unless one of his fellow three patriarchs takes part in the accusation and the inquiry into the matter. So as you can see, it doesn't get to the same level of detail of Synod of Mar Kopta or that authoritative tradition we discussed, but you clearly see a patriarch is judged by at least one patriarch in the example they give. Now let's.
All right, Simple, do you mind covering why he's being anachronistic in his usage of the Feth Negest?
Yeah, so the Feth Negest isn't like a strict law. And I asked a bunch of Habesha and Ethiopian brothers about this just to get. Deacon Merritt wanted to come on, unfortunately, he couldn't make it. But he told me this isn't a strict law for use and application of every time. It actually it comes from the Coptic Nomo canon of Ibn al-Asad, which has a bunch of errors, and it's based upon like forgeries. So there's a bunch of problems with it. Like it can't be used in every situation. And the canons pertaining to the treatment of the patriarch, which he's referencing here, are pulled from something called the Arabic canons of Nicaea, which are pseudo-epigraphical compilations, which are originated long after Nicaea from the 7th to 10th century. So they're dubious, but they project later ecclesiastical structures back in time. So it's reading into it. It's anachronistic. And then the evidence of this is the claim that it makes that the fathers of Nicaea commanded that there must be only 4 patriarchs in the world at one time: Alexandria, Antioch, Ephesus, right, and Rome, which aren't like which obviously isn't the case. So this is anachronistic, and the inclusion of these canons in the Feth Negest, does this make it so that the totality of Christians today recognize the validity of the Roman papacy every time in authority, or that we must ordain a patriarch of Rome every time because the canon says there has to be 4? Of course not, right? We don't hold to that like weird like pentarchy system that you guys do. So it can't be strict, basically. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I want to say Cyril Mette's point. Doesn't this refute their 1960s claim? Yeah, they can't. They can't make up their minds. These guys. When 1965, we come around, but they're trying to talk about us from this century. So it's okay.
Yeah.
All right. Or sorry, Agen.
Yeah, I was gonna add. Regarding the Arabic canons of Nicaea, I believe Subdeacon was gonna do a whole formal debate on this. Everyone in every tradition makes use of these canons, and in every single tradition nobody completely fully relies on them. They are able to influence decisions that are related, but we don't hold them like completely 100% fully authoritative, like Simple made the claim. one of the canons says like we need to have, I believe it ties it to the 4 Gospels. Like we need to have, a See of Rome, a See of Ephesus. It's like a modified version of the Pentarchy. We don't hold that. You don't hold that. It's present even in your tradition, these Arabic canons. This is like a ridiculous non sequitur.
Yeah, and it was tied to the 4 elements as well. So another thing to add there. But I think we're ready to continue now.
Let's get into the ecclesiastical history of Chalcedon, only ever so briefly. So let's talk about Dioscorus's deposition. This is really not the meat of the presentation, but it's going to come up, so I figured I'd cover it. He had a canonical deposition. So Chalcedon's minutes show evidence of integrity. This is something I think we cannot seriously take issue with. Keyword seriously. People take issue with it, but it's because they don't like what it says. Now, if you read Chalcedon's minutes, it preserves debates from opposing sides. It preserves criticisms of what's going on during the synod. It preserves defenses of Dioscorus himself. It even preserves the notes. Like it writes down them collecting the notes of the transcripts. So it's sort of like not actually people talking, but people say, stack the papers over here and I'll put them over there.
Pause
Which
it.
means it was such a slavish.
It even preserves them accepting the ibas on the basis of his letter. Go ahead.
All right.
Such a slavish recording of what happened there. You need a lot of evidence to say, well, no, there's something really, really inaccurate in these minutes, because as far as an ancient source goes, these look extremely authentic with the details. They preserve things that are not the details that are not really, they don't make the Chalcedonian side even look good, quite frankly. It's sometimes a hostile witness is your most
You said it.
witness, and Chalcedonian minutes definitely are like this. Now, what else do they record?
Pause right
relevant to us? They record the.
Pause right here. He himself is bearing witness to it. The best proof against Chalcedon is Chalcedon itself. Yes. We're not making the claim. Like, I don't know. He's trying to build this and then basically say, look, and the minutes showed Dioscorus rejected thrice summoned. So you can't say like, we tampered with it and Dioscorus didn't actually reject the thrice summons. We'll give it to you. The Chalcedon is telling the truth. Like you said, one of the proofs for that is how it falsifies your religion in the minutes. It's as clear as day. But nobody makes the argument that what we see in session 3, it's completely tampered with. No, we just make the argument, even in those thrice summons, the one calling for the summons itself contradicts the very procedure that the apostolic canons give you regarding what constitutes a canonical deposition.
Dioscorus refusing summons 3 times, canonically leading to his deposition. And that's extremely important. All right? He was canonically deposed.
Doesn't say he was under house arrest. The soldiers didn't let him leave. He doesn't say any of this. Okay.
Don't worry, Subdeacon. We'll get there.
What are the canons? Here's Apostolic Canon 74. If any bishop has been accused of anything by men worthy of credit, he must be summoned by the bishops. And if he appears and confesses or is...
I want everyone in the chat, because I'm sure Moss is going to bring this up. Pay attention to the first line. Men worthy of credit. That's very important. If any bishop has been accused of anything by men worthy of credit. And Moss, keep that going. Everyone remember that.
Convicted, a suitable punishment must be inflicted upon him. But if when he is summoned, he does not attend, let him be summoned a second time, 2 bishops being sent to him for that purpose. If then he will not attend, let him be summoned a third time, 2 bishops being again sent to him. But if even then he shall disregard the summons and not come, let the synod pronounce such sentence against him as appears right, that he may not seem to profit by avoiding judgment. All right, so you can see that after 3 summons, they could depose the patriarch there, or any bishop. We also have Canon 5 of Antioch, which applies the same to a priest or deacon. If any priest or deacon despises his bishop and separates himself from the church by gathering a congregation privately and setting up an altar, his bishop should summon him. If he refuses to submit even after his bishop summons him a first and a second time, the bishop must dismiss him from the clergy with no possibility of reinstatement to his position or rank. If he continues to disturb the church,
why is he quoting this? Is Dioscorus a priest or a deacon?
Another canon. My opinion is Canon 74 of the Apostolic Canons was the actual canon in force. But Oriental Orthodox canon law still preserves this tradition, and it's not a canonical eisegesis on my behalf. We have this in the Feth and Agest. If a bishop is accused by a reliable and faithful person, and he refuses to come, they shall send to him an envoy representing the bishops, either once or twice, and if he refuses, they shall send an envoy for the 3rd time. If he does not come, the council of bishops shall order his deposition. So, of course, there should be no debate.
I'm just going to pause right here. I think this is a good time for us to cover this thrice summons argument.
You want me to summarize it very quickly?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. If everybody reads Canon 3 of Chalcedon, it goes through Dioscorus' deposition. First, it's very suspicious from the get-go that the officials aren't there. The one presiding this is the Roman legates. So that's important to take note of. It's already shady from the get-go. The first summons to Dioscorus is issued by Eusebius of Dorelium. They read out accusations from Eusebius of Dorelium from Ephesus 2, where he himself says, Dioscorus deposed me at this council. He himself says that. And by the way, at Chalcedon, it wasn't until the later sessions, from 9 through 11, is when Ephesus 2's decision started to be retroactively undone. So that didn't happen yet. As far as session 3 is, starting from session 1 to session 3, Eusebius was not restored by any canonical means in the church. Not at all. Same with Theodoret. Theodoret, he was only there, they said it because the emperor and Leo wanted him. The same here with Eusebius. Eusebius, who's deposed by Dioscorus, reads out accusations against Dioscorus, and on that basis, issues the first summons. So who's the one who did the first summons? Someone deposed by Dioscorus. They went to go, and Dioscorus he couldn't move. He made it clear, I need permission to leave. They're not going to let me leave. They go back, they get permission, they go back, and Dioscorus basically says now he's ill, he's sick. When you read his history of Dioscorus 454, everyone knows what he means by saying that. But even forgetting that, the second summons, guess who does it? Eusebius of Dorelium. The third summons, guess who does it? Eusebius of Dorelium. After Apostolic Canon 74, the one that Craig cited, if there's any men worthy of credit who accuse a bishop, he is to be summoned 3 times. If he doesn't show up, you anathematize him. What's the canon right after this canon? Apostolic Canon 74. It's Apostolic Canon 75. It says a heretic cannot be a witness against a bishop. As far as Eusebius is concerned, he's a heretic condemned at Ephesus 2.
Can I actually bring this up on screen real quick, just so
course.
people can see what we're talking about?
Of course.
Yeah. Here we go. All right.
Let me remove. Perfect. So notice, Apostolic Canon 74 says the one who gives the thrice summons for it to work, it has to be by men worthy of credit. But what's the canon right after? Literally the next canon. A heretic is not to be received as a witness against a bishop. So can a heretic be that man worthy of credit who issues the thrice summons? Absolutely not. It's impossible for it to be a canonical thrice summons. As long as it's Eusebius of Dorelium doing it, who's a heretic, who he wasn't reinstated until sessions after session 3, after Dioscorus was deposed. So you have a heretic being a witness against a bishop, and this is your quote-unquote men worthy of credit. It shows that this is not acting upon Apostolic Canon 74. It shows the ridiculousness of this council, how silly it is. You guys want to add anything?
It's papism. It's papism because Leo unilaterally abrogated Ephesus 2 on his own. He has his own synod in Rome, and he does it by himself. So they're accepting papism there, and they're accepting it in 518, like I said earlier, with the libellus of Hormistus, Justin deposing separate. So it's either papism or they're just making it up as they go. That's it.
Yep, perfect. And I'd like to add, we have precedents for this rejection in the early church, right? The same situation occurred with St. John Chrysostom at the Synod of Oak. He was summoned 3 times and deposed accordingly because he refused to attend and recognize the legality of the synod. And quote unquote, his open enemies were judges. So let's pose a question to Craig here, right? How is the deposition of St. John Chrysostom at the Synod of Oak any different than that at Chalcedon with St. Dioscorus? Why is one canonical and the other not? Surely the answer must be that the witnesses of St. John Chrysostom were heretics, they were not reliable, they were not faithful, thus Apostolic Canon 74 does not apply. But unfortunately for Craig, this is much harder for him to demonstrate than for us, because it was St. Theophilus of Alexandria who presided over the Synod of Oak and orchestrated the deposition of St. John Chrysostom. We both venerate St. Theophilus as a saint. Additionally, there's another example that not a lot of people know. There's St. Eutychius of Constantinople. He was condemned, deposed, and summoned by Emperor Justinian. And at this point in history, Justinian was a full-blown Julianist. So Eutychius refused the thrice summons because, of course, he believed he wasn't being judged canonically. And so he was deposed, condemned, and exiled, right? So you have your own saints summoning your own saint and deposing your own saint. Was this a canonical deposition, Truglia? What are you going to say? Right? You're arguing that Saint Dioscorus was thrice summoned, therefore he was canonically deposed. What about Saint John Chrysostom? What about your Saint Eutychus of Constantinople?
All right. So notice the argument Moss just made. It's very easy for us to show, especially how this thrice summons issued against Dioscorus is a shoddy one, because it's supposed to be by men worthy of credit. Eusebius was a condemned heretic. His deposition wasn't even reversed by any collegial process until later sessions. So we have a very easy route. The next canon says a heretic cannot be a witness against a bishop. Eusebius was the witness who issued for the thrice summons. Therefore, it doesn't work because he's not a man worthy of credit. They have an issue now because they reject Chrysostom's deposition, but they believe the one who did it was a man worthy of credit. So if even in this case, not even using this Apostolic Canon 75 argument, they think that you can't just apply Apostolic Canon 74 as is. Because even in that case, Theophilus, they respect, they highly revere. Constantinople too treats him as an authority. So they believe Theophilus is a man worthy of credit. And even in that case, they still think Chrysostom wasn't deposed. So now what happens when you don't have a man worthy of credit, right? They're picking and choosing.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, switch it.
All right.
Dioscorus was canonically deposed. He was no longer patriarch. His deposition was accepted by all patriarchs in Chalcedon, meeting that standard, and his own synod. This is important, and his own synod, because they didn't fight to the death resisting his deposition, but they were willing to die to not sign the decree of the council until they went back to Egypt. All right, they were willing to die until they could replace Dioscorus, not to sign that decree. So they weren't in opposition to the deposition. They're in opposition of signing the decree prematurely. So this gives a good understanding of what the church in Alexandria understood to be legitimate or not. So what was the Egyptian synod's dying words? What were they willing to die for?
Hold on. Okay.
Subdeacon about to crash out.
Well, they didn't sign. Some of them signed, right? Some of the Alexandrian bishops signed. A minority of the Synod of Alexandria signed. The majority did not. Why? Why, Ronald McDonald? So when they get back to Alexandria, who did they elect? Those same bishops. They elect Timothy. Yeah? Not Proterius, who the emperor tried to force on them. So then why didn't they just sign along with the minority ones? Why?
Good question. And we of course we know. So Saint Dioscorus was accompanied by 19 bishops, right? So we know 19 attended the Council of Chalcedon with him. 4 deserted him at the first session. And scholar Timothy Gregory, he states this represented a larger movement of opposition. So this has nothing to do with Chalcedon. 4 bishops deserted him at the first session. 13 bishops stood with him to the very end, even after his deposition. And this was at the point when it was obvious to everyone that his case was lost, right? So Craig is about to read this. We'll let him read this. These are the quote unquote dying words of the bishops.
States this in the council, quoting them. But since the most religious bishops of our diocese happen to be very many, while we, being easy to count, are not able to represent them, meaning all of them, we entreat your preeminence in this holy and great council to have pity on us and wait for our archbishop so that we may follow his decision according to ancient custom. But if we do anything without the approval of our leader, the whole Egyptian diocese will attack us and acting uncanonically. All right. And so
we see that by the end of the synod, these bishops were on the floor. They were begging for their lives, and contrast this to the very first synod, very first session. Just 1 second.
Maybe you want to put it on the screen, the slides?
No, I'm just looking for the quote of the bishops. Yeah, here we go. So in the first session, these same bishops accompanying Dioscorus cried out, saying, "A Christian fears no one, an Orthodox fears no one. Bring fire and we'll show you." So how could these same bishops who were so firm in their upholding of the faith, how could they succumb and beg on their knees by the end of the synod? Well, it's clear that there was extreme pressure placed upon them. Let's continue.
it continues. The most God-beloved Archbishop Anatolius, they say, knows that the custom that has prevailed in the Egyptian diocese is that all the bishops obey the Archbishop of Alexandria. We are not disobeying the council, but we shall be killed in our native land. Have pity on us. You have the power. We submit. We do not disobey. It is preferable for us to die at the hands of the master of the world, i.e. the emperor, of your preeminence and of the Holy Council. Then there in Egypt, let us have an archbishop, and we shall sign an assent to Chalcedon. So as we can see, the Egyptian Synod, in their words, in very believable words, feared domestic violence more. Clearly, they're throwing themselves at the mercy of the side they think that's actually going to let them go and not kill them. So what do we know to be the consent of the Egyptian Synod? Consent that's derived by being fear of death in Alexandria, or the consent they gave to leaving Chalcedon, getting a new patriarch, and then accepting the council? Obviously, the consent that's more legitimate is to the less violent side. Now, obviously, there's more than a small degree of intimidation in Constantinople itself, in Chalcedon, because that's what's coming out of those words. But there is no less, in fact, much more back in Egypt. And so the question is, all right, there's intimidation on both sides. How do we know what people are really consenting to? The logical answer to that question is the side they're less afraid of is the side that they're giving more authentic consent to. So it's the Chalcedon that the Egyptian Synod gave more authentic consent. So what
I don't know if I can hold. They like whenever Chalcedonians talk about violence, it's just hilarious to me, because right after Chalcedon, they kill 30,000 like Coptic Christians without batting an eye. Go ahead.
So this is just based. Well, that's the most logical, because I think it is. Okay, no. By the way, the point I said earlier about the minority of the Egyptian Synod signing the Chalcedon, notice he didn't mention that. He never said it at all.
Yep.
So it shows. It shows like there's a lot of holes in his presentation. Right now, he's just basing it off of something that he thinks is logical. So then that's it. Craig thinks it's logical. It's logical. It's right.
Yeah, and
That's
it
how
doesn't follow.
Source, what do you guys say? Sources? So what's your source? Trust me. Whatever that meme is.
Yeah.
Come on.
And you know, you're saying it's the minority. There were over 90 bishops under the jurisdiction of Alexandria during this time. The 19 chosen to go with Saint Dioscorus were disproportionately from Lower Egypt, which was an area that already had opposition, or already sided with the family of Saint Cyril. There's a little bit of politics there. On top of that, I want to mention 4 bishops didn't even end up going to the 4th session. They refused to go because of the sheer disrespect that was that Saint Dioscorus faced. Otto Seek, he's a historian, a church historian. He described Saint Dioscorus as a man who behaved like a man in the collection of howling old women, right? And scholars unanimously, they agree that Saint Dioscorus at this council was a convenient scapegoat. His guilt cleared all other participants at Ephesus too, and that's why he was a minority. That's why the bishops who attended Chalcedon were so willing to sign on his condemnation. We have a quote from Thalassius of Caesarea. So when he was accused for his role in Ephesus 2, in order to defend himself, this is what he said. He said, "I was named in the Sacra, but I did not know why. I only know that I did not prevent it, and that I did not have sufficient authority by myself to insist on the reading, so I was not responsible." So what's he doing here? He's putting his hands up in the air. Well, you know, I wasn't in charge, but I didn't stop it, so I'm innocent. And the Chalcedonians were fine with this, right? They were fine with this. They every single bishop that was condemned or accused at Chalcedon was pardoned and reinstated during the 4th session. Every single one. They were all confronted with a choice between loss of their bishopric, loss of their position, or the benefits of leadership and a large and rich see, and the support of Emperor Marcian, and the support of Empress Pulcheria. Those were the 2 choices they were given. Juvenal of Jerusalem, for instance, who we know was very vocal in Ephesus 2, he was a political animal. He won the elevation of his patriarchates, right? Anatolius as well. In Canon 28, his Constantinople was made second, I believe, over Alexandria. So all of these bishops who attended Ephesus 2, who participated in Ephesus 2, they were all reinstated. They were all pardoned, except for one, right? And I want you viewers to compare this to some of the hagiographies you hear at church, right? Some of the lives of the saints, some of the stories we hear about emperors persecuting our saints, giving them the choice, you know, denounce your faith, right? Give up Christianity, you'll have all the riches in the world. And they refused, right? Parallel that with Saint Dioscorus. Anyone like to add anything?
You got it.
Pretty much. It's pretty.
Alright.
Did you sorry, I might have missed it. Did you cover Proterius being chosen by the civil authorities, right? Not by the Egyptian bishop?
Not yet, not yet.
Okay,
We'll
okay.
get there. We'll
Okay,
get
okay.
Third after Chalcedon. They elected St. Proteus of Alexandria to the Alexandrian Patriarchate, and they accepted Chalcedon. That's what occurred. All right. Almost no Egyptian bishops actively opposed Chalcedon. Now, you'll have Roman Catholic apologists, Oriental apologists, and they'll claim Chalcedon was never really fully accepted. Let's quote Timothy of Alexandria, Timothy the Cat. He says, all the bishops, so this is quoting a non-Chalcedonian, all the bishops were denying faith in our Lord and dividing him into two natures. Dioscorus was the one true archbishop who had zeal for the blasphemed Christ. So he admits the synods all accepted Chalcedon. He says all the bishops. Now, it's a bit of an exaggeration. There's like one or two, because the ones that consecrated him that didn't. But he accepts that the Egyptian synod accepted Chalcedon. So this should put that idea to rest.
Wow.
That Chalcedon lacked consensus. We have proof that it had consensus. We have the people against Chalcedon accepting that
Please
Chalcedon had
pause.
consensus.
Please pause. Okay. Craig is white. All right. So when he reads our fathers, all of Judea and Samaria and Syria came out to see him. All of them came out to see him. So for he's saying all of the bishops, he's not talking about the Alexandrian ones. You read your own council. The minutes are showing that. Stop, like he's trying to be a lawyer and legal and white and Western about it. This is not how you read patristics. It's not how you read the fathers. So this is not orthodoxy. What do they call it? Ethos or nous, or I don't know the words that these guys.
News. Yeah, news.
Yeah. This is not how this is done. You're doing it wrong.
And I'd like to quote Saint Timothy Alurius here. We will discuss his story shortly because he becomes very relevant. But because Craig is saying, "Oh, the whole world was against Alexandria," right? So he calls Saint Dioscorus the second Joseph of Arithmia, caring for the body of Christ. He says, all the priests were scoffing at our Lord. So too his utterly devoted and loyal chief priest of Alexandria at the hour of rebellion, when all the bishops were denying faith in our Lord and dividing him into two natures. He was the only true archbishop who had zeal for the blasphemed Christ, right? So that's sort of puts into perspective the things that Saint Dioscorus were facing, and I'd love for you to parallel this with Saint Athanasius. It's the Orthodox versus the world, the one versus the all, the minority versus the majority.
So that said, Timothy the Cat, as I was referring to before, was a consecrated, a non-Chalcedonian anti-patriarch, because St. Proterius was already patriarch, by two bishops, Eusebius of Pelusium and Peter the Iberian, the latter not
This is not true, but we'll get there.
even an Egyptian. There was no patriarchal acceptance of his bishopric, and this violates the canons and, as we talked about before, precedent, because we lack patriarchal acceptance of him, which we had for all the other undisputed patriarchs. And the history of the previous schisms, the side without this was the side in schism. So that being said, let's look at the canons themselves.
Okay, I think this is a good point to pause for now and sort of discuss Proterius and Saint Timothy Alurius, right? So first, he brings up the belief that Saint Timothy was only ordained by two bishops, and this is an issue, whatever, right? So we have Saint Zechariah of Miletin recording, since two Egyptian bishops were present, it was necessary that some other bishops should be found, And on making diligent inquiry, some of the people heard of Peter the Iberian, who had left Palestine and was sojourning there in Alexandria. So it was 2 Egyptian bishops present, and then St. Peter the Iberian was found. The belief that St. Timothy Illyrius was only consecrated by 2 bishops comes from Grillmeyer, who relied solely on Evagrius Scholasticus, the Chalcedonian. Pauline Allen, the scholar, stated that Evagrius' Chalcedonian theological stance influenced his selection of information. Evagrius Scholasticus was trying to defend Chalcedonian-aligned political agents against negative reputation. And these are the words of scholar Pauline Allen. And this, of course, extends to St. Timothy's consecration. But even then, if we are as charitable as possible and rely solely on the Chalcedonian account, Evagrius notes that Peter and Eusebius were present, but not that they were the only ones present.
We have Canon 4 of Nicaea. It states that it is by all means proper that a bishop should be appointed by all the bishops in the province. But should this be difficult, either on account of urgent necessity or because of distance, 3 at least should meet together. And the suffrages of the absent bishops also being given and communicated in writing, then the ordination should take place. But in every province, and the ratification of what is done should be left to the metropolitan. So this implies clearly greater reception of a patriarch. By default, it should be consensus. If an emergency, at least 3 people should be present. And what we have is just 2, and one of them is not even an Egyptian. So clearly, Timothy the Cat is not canonical. I mean, that's absolutely clear. We also have the same in Canon 6 of Nicaea, which states, and this is to be universally understood, that if anyone be made bishop.
He said, who does he think ordained Timothy?
He thinks it was only 2 bishops. He thinks it was Eusebius and St. Peter the Iberian. Even though we know it's 3, because St. Zacharias records that it was 3.
So why is, so he's saying 2 and 1 wasn't an, so what is, okay, what is he basing this off when he's saying that?
His reading of Evagrius.
No, not even. Trust me. Craig is pulling almost all of this from Wikipedia, and I will show. I promise you, I will show this later too. But actually, the claim comes from Evagrius, or the claim comes specifically from Grillmeyer's interpretation of Evagrius.
Okay, and he thinks that the majority of the Synod of Alexandria ordains Proterius.
Yeah, which we will show is absolutely not the case.
Okay.
Without the consent of the metropolitan, the Great Synod has declared that such a man ought not to be a bishop. If however 2 or 3 bishops shall, from natural love of contradiction, oppose the common suffrage of the rest, it is reasonable in accordance with the classical law, then let the choice of the majority prevail. So what is the answer? The majority of the Synod decides legitimate bishops, right? You can't have a minority decide this. Canons are very clear. But now let's get into, see, it's not my eisegesis. The Feth and Agest talks about patriarchal elections. In fact, gives much more specific details as to what's appropriate. Ethiopian canon law says the following. The election of the patriarch shall take place only in the presence of the bishops and the metropolitan, who is the archbishop. If there is a dispute about his election, it shall be settled in accordance with the advice of the majority. So how do we determine who's the right patriarch? If there's a dispute, the majority decides. It also states the people must know the name, the face, and the character of the person who is to be appointed. It is not that only one of them knows him. So essentially, we can't have secret elections. There's also more detail. For example, it talks about how the one appointed first is the patriarch, if there was 2 elections and things like this. But I think it's, if I say the majority determines who's patriarch in the Feth.
So you can't have secret elections. What about the ones that were happening in the catacombs? What about those ones? They weren't secret.
Who knows? And to talk about these secret elections, I believe since the 6th century, every single Greek Melkite patriarch of Alexandria was ordained where? In Alexandria? No, they were ordained in Constantinople and shipped off to Alexandria. And we'll get there. But for now, I think it's the perfect time to cover this Proterius, right? Because he's claiming Proterius was the majority. He was the choice of the Synod. He was the choice of the Egyptians. Everybody loved him. And St. Timothy was this fringe secret bishop, right? Simple, if you're still with us, do you mind covering the section on Proterius?
Yeah. And
okay. Just
put anything on screen?
No, I don't know.
You can. I mean, okay, we can stream this this little. Oops, sorry guys, sorry, my bad. These are the canons we were talking about. So this is Canon 6 of Nicaea that he butchered, and Canon 4, and then the Chalcedonian Canon 25 that we'll get into a little bit here.
Yes.
But the idea is okay. So Proterius, who he says was chosen by the majority, he was actually chosen by the civil authorities. So the emperor, the empire, not by Egyptian bishops, not by the church, not by the Synod of Alexandria. He was chosen by them contrary to the canon law he was holding so closely to, and forced in as the new patriarch, while Dioscorus, by the way, at this time, still alive and uncanonically deposed as we were going in further. Like, to this day,
notice,
sorry,
I want to pause, sorry. The entire argument, it's a cascade that already presupposes from the very beginning, it's a domino effect. Like every other thing we're going to talk about in the future regarding Alexandrian succession is presupposing Dioscorus' deposition was canonical, which he doesn't defend. He just cites Apostolic Canon 74 and calls it a day, right? He doesn't deal with the Eusebius, the Eusebius of Aurelium calling for it. He doesn't deal with the Synod of Oak. It's all building on this. As long as Dioscorus is still alive, you are wasting our time, Craig. You have that's the whole major of their argument. They have to demonstrate Dioscorus was canonically deposed, and then you can talk about Proterius and whatnot afterwards. But as long as he's the bishop, as long as he's alive, call it a day. There's nothing to talk about. That's the rule laid out explicitly by Cyprian, Payson of Barcelona. Everybody in the 3rd century regarding the Novatianist controversy. Anyone who talked about the Novatianist controversy, their issue was that there's a law of a singleness of priesthood. You cannot be ordained while the bishop is alive. That's the a priori rule. That's it. So all of this is presupposing Dioscorus' canonical deposition.
There's a good question here in the chat from Happy Orange Cat. Are the EO guys authorized by their clergy to be doing this online stuff? Probably not, for the most part. If there are some of them who are, hopefully, but the most part, no. And especially that guy Cleve, who's a catechumen and refuses debates because he says he's a catechumen, but then he goes and he says whatever he wants and then he hides behind everybody else. So how about this, Cleve? How about know your role and shut your mouth and just go and learn at the catechesis and don't talk about the other people yet? How about that?
Chill, Subdeacon. He's gonna make you debate someone else. Relax.
You're gonna get crushed by David Erhan, just like he crushed Agen, according to 5 AIs cited by Orthodox Shahada. Anyway,
all right, simple. You want to continue for us?
Yeah. So Proterius is their amazing martyr / saint who was forced in by the imperial authority. Now, when Saint Macarius, the bishop of Tikau, reminded Proterius with the warning words of Pope Dioscorus to prevent him from trying to go with Chalcedon and go with the flow, he hesitated. So Proterius got scared at first, but then he killed Saint Macarius anyway, and Saint Macarius became the first martyr at the hands of Chalcedon. So this guy, Proterius, kept going through, right? So Saint Timothy was consecrated when he was, because Emperor Marcion was dead at this time as well. And Saint Timothy, right, had the support of the clergy, the support of the people of Alexandria, and the support of the entire force of the monks and the church, right, or the church in entirety. So Saint Timothy is the so-called non-Chalcedonian, or you can say Ephesian, because we hold to Ephesus. And Proterius had the support of the governor, the emperor, the Roman soldiers, and the empire. So, Craig, who was the majority here? Okay. And furthermore, Saint Timothy held a council in Alexandria in 477, in which they condemned the Council of Chalcedon. By the way, for all of those who say, "Oh, you didn't have any councils," no, we had a council right after Chalcedon, a few years later in Alexandria. How could we even hold a council? How can Saint Timothy hold a council if he's the minority? Like, like Saint Timothy will call a council and be like, "Why are we listening to this random dude?" Right?
They had AI. So, they had AI.
I guess.
And I just want to, sorry, I just want to add something. So Saint Timothy was imprisoned several times during his rule, or during his episcopacy. So The governor of Egypt during this time was a man named Dionysius. And so when St. Timothy was consecrated, Dionysius was in Upper Egypt. So they were safe to consecrate St. Timothy. Once Dionysius returned and he heard of the enthronement of St. Timothy, he imprisoned St. Timothy with the whole Roman force and carried him off to a place called Cabarcerson. When he was imprisoned, clashes between citizens and Roman soldiers became severe, and many were slaughtered. To end the conflict, the governor restored St. Timothy to his city and to his church, making him coexist with Proterius. So the people loved St. Timothy so much that the Chalcedonian governor had to reinstate him. He had to have two bishops coexisting at once. Simple. Can you continue?
Yeah, but
and
that's a huge point, because he said earlier the ones who the people are scared of, and the logical thing. The government is putting this guy.
Yes.
The government with the soldiers are putting him. Kai just texted me saying AI says that Proterius was the rightful.
Okay, end the stream. End the stream.
I can't wait. We'll keep talking about Proterius for sure.
So Proterius, they love Proterius, right? Proterius, so Mossy was like, he put in a really great point. Everyone loved Timothy, right? But everyone separated from Proterius, the Chalcedonian patriarch, in disgust. They hated him. He was so unpopular that shortly after Timothy was consecrated, some record, and this is disputed, but some say that the Egyptian people hated him so much they killed him, right? And this account is contested because some people just say like, oh, Proterius is a martyr who got killed by the Egyptian people. I mean, I personally like to take the take that from Evagrius, Michael the Syrian, and Zacharias Rector, who says that he was killed by a soldier instead because he was threatening the Romans as well. Proterius was not, nobody liked Proterius, basically. This guy's a saint in their church. He paid so in the end, he pays mercenaries with gold to kill faithful believers, so-called non-Chalcedonians, or just the Orthodox, and filled their hands with blood, but they ceased because a certain soldier had enough of it, of killing the innocents, and he invited Proterius to show him everyone that he had killed, like as a fun event, and then killed Proterius. And then everybody was in joy after hearing this. And this is all recorded by Zechariah of Melitene, Michael the Syrian, etc., etc. Right? So if Evagrius also, he's a Chalcedonian, right? He says that Proterius was extremely, extremely wicked. He uses force. He forces himself in to gain acceptance for him and Chalcedon, banishes anybody, he exiles everybody who opposes him, and uses civil and governmental powers to seize their property. The armies employed by Proterius, again, this is a Chalcedonian so-called patriarch, committed heinous acts, including widespread, let's say like YouTube-friendly words, grape, and denial of basic resources in an attempt to starve the populace into submission. They were basically, that the horrible tragedy with the Eastern Orthodox Church during the time of Russia under Stalin. Okay, imagine Stalin a bunch of years earlier. That was Proterius. Okay, and even under all of this abuse and persecution, all of the Egyptian church refused Proterius. Why would we care? We're the Church of Martyrs. Bring it on. So Proterius, like, he was even angrier. He armed them. Many died against Proterius, right? For example, like John Rufus describes him as the new Caiaphas, right? A man without virtue, a hard-faced wolf who had relied on soldiers to keep his position, who rejoiced in Dioscorus' death and deserved his own fate of getting killed by his own soldiers. So if you are a Coptic Orthodox who goes to, who attends church even once, right? You'll see sometimes in the Synaxarium, he's responsible for the death of thousands of martyrs that we venerate today, and he was extremely unpopular in Egypt. The only reason that Proterius was imposed in Egypt was because of the soldiers, right?
Okay,
everyone wanted.
Yeah,
sorry.
Keep going. No, finish the point. I'll say it when.
Even his own people, his own clergy, they were like, enough. We can't handle this anymore. Just reconcile it with Saint Timothy. after his death. Like after Proterius died, they tried to reconcile with the non-Chalcedonians that they hate so much, right? But the citizens of Alexandria at this point, they were done with it. They refused because they had killed so much of them. And so the clergy went back to Rome and they stirred up Leo against Saint Timothy because they had to impose it again. And then I'm almost done here. This is horrible. So brace yourselves. Here, it's recorded in one of the scholars, Sawir's Ash, that Cosma, the Melkite patriarch of Alexandria, had a litigation with Pope Khalil in the 8th century in front of a Muslim judge, saying, "I hold the faith of Marcion the Prince. God speedily raised up Marcion and the patriarch Leo, who agreed with Nestorius and his followers, hint, hint, and everywhere took possession of the churches over which bishops have ruled up to this day. But our bishop at Alexandria," again, this is a Chalcedonian talking, "Proterius, was slain by the Alexandrians. And therefore the prince commanded that an army should be collected, sent it to Alexandria, and told the soldiers to slay with the sword. And so they killed 30,000 in 1 hour. 30,000. Does this guy sound like a saint to you? Is this someone you want to venerate? Like Chalcedonians, does this guy killed 30,000 people 1 hour?
I want to ask Craig, why, if that's the case, like if the case is Proterius is who everybody wanted and majority, and these guys always had the power, the Chalcedonians always had the power, so why are the Egyptian Christians 99.9% Coptic Orthodox?
Who knows?
I want to
No, you go ahead.
very quickly. Number one, them wanting to compromise. Who does that when they're the winners? That's number one. Number two, killing 30,000 is a benchmark of what the majority position was. Are they killing their own people when you want to kill 30,000? Are you going to kill your own side? No, you're killing 30,000 people who disagree with you. So the whole thing with Proterius is he needs the empire for the whole thing. Every side can bear witnesses. He needs the empire to, quote unquote, stay in place. Everyone is showing their complete loyalty to Timothy and Dioscorus while he was in exile.
Mm-hmm.
They waited until his death in order to ordain Timothy, not because, you know, they want to cause a schismatic sect, but it's because Proterius is the one who was ordained while Dioscorus was alive, not vice versa. I just wanted to add that very quickly.
All right, and I just want to conclude this story of Proterius with two final quotes that directly refute the claim that Craig's making. So first is by, I believe, W.H.C. Friend. Proterius was not the master of his own house. His following was largely made up of nobles and officials. The great majority of the Egyptian church and people had separated themselves from him in disgust. Second quote from Evagrius. The mass of the church resolutely refused to accept Proterius. What can we say now? His own scholars saying this, right? What can we say now? Where is Craig getting these ideas from? But I think we're ready to continue the video.
Yeah, let me put it up.
Because you could say, well, Chalcedon was so terrible, it required violating the canon. So I don't think this is a very compelling argument. It's already a kind of desperate pleading sort of argument, is you don't have the canonical upper hands. Your own canons say you're in violation. So then you have to say, well, we had to break the canons because Chalcedon was so wrong. So ever so briefly, I want to give maybe a good reason you haven't thought about why Chalcedon should be understood to be consistent with the Council of Ephesus, with St. Cyril, with St. Celestine of Rome, and others. So are irregularities justified due to the heterodoxy of Chalcedon?
Sorry.
I would say he should have brought all this stuff up in the debate, because that was the debate topic. Let's keep it going.
All right.
Now, in this video, we are covering ecclesiological history mostly, so only a brief discussion of the context behind Leo and Chalcedon's Christology will be offered here. But it's worth noting that the Council of Ephesus and pre-Chalcedonian saints have diophysite or two-nature language. The West views diophysitism as sufficiently
Get ready for this, Agen.
St. Ambrose's diophysitism is even in the Council of Ephesus decree. To quote it, and you can see the actual citation to the Council of Ephesus. Let us preserve the recognition of the Godhead, writes St. Ambrose, and the flesh, the Son of God who speaks in each is one, because each nature is in him. Note in him how the glory of God and how the sufferings of man, that as God he teaches divine things, and that as man he says human things because he spoke in my essence. St. Ambrose here is verbatim quoted in the second tome of Leo, that's letter 165-4, and St. Cyril clearly understood this as Western lingo communicating the same Christology. Because here we have a Western saint saying each nature is in Christ, and he spoke in human essence after the incarnation, and he takes no issue with essence and nature being used synonymously, of two natures being mentioned. He saw this as sufficiently anti-Nestorian that St. Cyril included this in his Florilegium that's in the council. Now, here is some additional context that
right here.
you might have not considered.
I've dealt with this so many times. I'm tired of it. I have a video on my channel responding to David Erhan's attempt to refute my Florilegium. In that, you'll see my best case for St. Ambrose's Christology. St. Severus cites the exact quote Truglia just cited. It contradicts Leo. Ambrose says, the same says. Leo says, it is not the same nature to say I and the Father are one and the Father is greater than I. The Latin word is iadam. So it contradicts the tome, the very passage you just cited. That's number one. Number two, each nature is in him is not equivalent to him is in each nature. It's not the same. Two in him is not the same as him in two, right? This is just simple, kindergarten ordering, okay? And number two, next point I want to make, Cyril himself says two natures are in a man, in him, and then a paragraph later says the two are no longer two. So it tells you nothing about how he conceives it after the union. And I've already showed many times, St. Ambrose explicitly teaches one nature. Why? He uses a Monophysite analogy, talking about giants, using a Monophysite word from a contemporary translating Plato, teaching a Monophysite union. Okay? So Monophysite language, Monophysite analogy about a Monophysite passage in Plato, talking about a giant of twin nature, which he uses in the genitive singular and said una sit. So Ambrose's Christology here, guess who were appealing to him as Diophysites? The Nestorian party at Ephesus. They had their own dossier and it got rejected by the Ephesians. What's cited at Ephesus is not what you find at Chalcedon. Two natures in him is not the same as one existing in two natures.
And I was turned on to this by a friend of mine. Now, in the Oxford University Press Early Christian Writings Volume 3 series, it says the following in the introduction. Cyril also provided Celestine with a dossier of Nestorius writings. By mid-430, at the latest, Celestine had tasked his archdeacon Leo, right, the future bishop of Rome, with evaluating them. So whose job, right? Whose job was it to inform Celestine whether to oppose Nestorius or not? St. Leo of Rome. Well, when have you heard that from the Oriental Orthodox side? So Leo is the one who's concocting the Christology in opposition to Nestorius. How did Leo do this? Leo in turn requested John Cassian, another saint, to examine the text of Nestorius, produce a document to advise Celestine and the Roman Church about the matter. In his On the Incarnation of the Lord against Nestorius, Cassian firmly rejected Nestorius' position. As the first Latin text to assess Nestorius' theology, this treatise had a profound influence. In August 430, a synod met in Rome under Celestine that formally condemned Nestorius. And so what does this document actually state in that then they condemned Nestorius? Was this document
Pause right here.
You bet it was. Quoted in the...
Pause right here. I love when people go to John Cassian. It's like my favorite thing that people do. Number one, I want him to demonstrate the sources that it was specifically Celestine tasking Leo with dealing with Nestorianism. That's number one. Number two, even if that's demonstrated, you yourself said Leo just delegated it to someone else. When you actually read on the incarnation against Nestorius, it falsifies your worldview. It says Christ was prius of double substantia, previously, and he became of one power, one virtue in the Latin. He says you cannot claim a distinction between God the Word and his flesh because the two exist in unum substantia, one substance. To the point, Roman Catholics themselves say if Leo had read what Cassian himself just said, he would have freaked out. So let's talk about that. Hopefully you can on this video, Truglia. What Cassian actually taught. What he's about to cite is Leporius' confession, which is not John Cassian. So notice the shift he did to make his argument. It went from Celestine to Leo to Cassian to Leporius. Are you serious? You're going to jumping to 4 people in order to show, Ephesus taught Diophysitism? Even if I grant you the best possible case, Leporius' confession is Chalcedonian, look how many jumps you did. You went 5, actually. Cyril tasked Celestine, Celestine tasked Leo, Leo tasked Cassian, and then Cassian cited Leporius' confession. Do you not hear yourself? This is way too far to bear any witness on what Ephesus teaches, even if I grant it to you. But if we actually do look at Leporius' confession, it teaches one will in Christ, and that the two become one without loss of their natural properties. And that's why it says they're not redactas in one substance. He says the two natura are not redactas in one substance. It doesn't deny that there's a union in one nature or one substance. It denies that they become reduced to it, which is why Cassian in book 3 says there's one substance over and over and over. Watch my recent video if you don't believe me. This is the most ridiculous argument I've ever heard. As for the last part, inseparable of twin substance, thank God he didn't use the New Advent translation, which says existing in two natures, because I would have laughed if that's what he put. The Latin doesn't say that. I said he's a giant inseparable of twin substance. It doesn't tell you whether it's two after the union, the way Augustine would have meant twin substance, or whether it refers to the pre-Ambrosian understanding of what constitutes a twin substance. You find it in Lactantius, Aurelius Prudentius Clemens, that it refers to a singular reality. And all that's important, all I have to demonstrate, I don't have to demonstrate anything about Laporius' confession. The only thing I have to demonstrate is what Cassian thought it meant. And in book 3, he says there's one substance in Christ, which no Chalcedonian has ever dealt with. And I recommend everyone watch my recent video. The church fathers always taught one nature. Check my section on St. Ambrose. Check my section on John Cassian. You'll see this spelled out verbatim. You want to continue, my friend?
A man named Laporius, who was a Nestorian before Nestorius, when he repented of his adoptionism, he wrote the following, which Cassian quotes and approves of. And confessing both the substance of the flesh and of the word, one and the same God, far be it from us to believe in such a way that we suppose that two natures are reduced into one substance. Repeat, far be it from us to believe in such a way that we suppose that two natures are reduced into one substance by a kind of fusion. And thus the word and flesh became one in each other, so that while remaining in their perfection naturally, both substances, without prejudice to themselves, both communicate a divine humanity and participate in human divinity. We faithfully, without any doubt, believe that one and the same Son of God, always inseparable of twin substance, even called a giant in the days of his flesh. All right. So
the video lag.
Ambrose, but here we see again very clearly nature's being used and substance being used in the plural. Twin substance is a plural, as I covered in both Plato and in Ambrose. Cassian is quoting approvingly Laporius' recantation of Proto-Nestorianism.
Pause right here.
And just so you're aware,
in Plato, it's referring to two substances becoming one. Did he not pay attention to my rebuttal? I have it on my own video. It's Plato making an argument that two substances mix, and he verbatim says they become one third kind of substance from two. The very same word in Ambrose. But keep it going. Whatever makes him sleep at night.
Saints Augustine and Aurelius signed the same recantation. So it's not like just Laporius. Saints signed this in the bottom, and it's quoted by a saint, and it's what was used in order to concoct the anti-Nestorian position of the Roman Church by John Cassian. Now, it commended Laporius back to the Gaulish clergy as repenting of his adoptionism. Laporius is using the term twin substance from Ambrose's repeated interpretation of the giants. Laporius and Cassian explicitly denied that twin substance is one substance. I'm going to repeat this. Laporius and Cassian explicitly deny that twin substance is one substance. That's a quote from what we just read. But rather, to quote it, two natures. I'm going to repeat that.
You know
Laporius
what?
And Cassian
keep it going while I get quotes out.
Is one substance, but rather two natures. This is explicitly quoted in the document that was put together in order to inform the Roman Synod to deny Nestorius before the Council of Ephesus. This is the context of St. Celestine's Christology. So this begs the question, is Chalcedon's clarification legitimate? Laporius' recantation is the basis the West rejected Nestorianism signed to Ephesus, as I just said. Leo's Christology was seen as a continuation of this. After all, Leo's the one who put this together with Cassian. The West had already flattened the usage of the term nature, as we could see. They used nature and substance synonymously before Ephesus, which in my opinion gives like a theological expiration date to language like the natural and essential union, right? Because how can you talk about there's a natural union, there's one nature? I mean, there's a proper way of talking about that, really. But how do you talk about that when you already start using the term substance and nature synonymously? You almost need a new word. And this begs there to be a terminological clarification.
Pause right here. Pause right here. It's fitting this guy gets another lesson. Maybe he didn't hear me during my debate and didn't hear me during my rebuttal. But while my PDF is uploading, just to talk about this point very quickly, do you know what the Latin word for hypostasis is, Truglia? It's substantia, literally. Sub means under, stantia means standing, which is why Marius Mercator, who's actually the Latin authority on Ephesus, because he's the one who translated Ephesus for the West, when it came to the 12 anathemas saying you cannot divide the hypostases, it says you cannot divide the substantias in the Latin. So that's how the Latin West viewed these terms. Yes, nature and substance were synonymous, because in the East, it was feces and hypostases, which is what was synonymous. So in teaching two feces at Chalcedon, you're teaching two hypostases. In teaching one feces at Ephesus, you're teaching one substantia in the Latin West. And while my slideshow is still processing, I don't know why, I'm going to show this all from Plato, from Ambrose, from Cassian himself. that they're teaching, they're using words. The twin substance phrase is about one substance, and Cassian himself, with his own mouth, says there's one substance in Christ, verbatim. If you want to keep it going while my presentation is loading, I'll tell you when to pause.
So when Eutyches confessed one nature after the union, in the Western theological vocabulary, which we just saw, that would mean one substance after the union, and this is something explicitly denied in Celestine's day by John Cassian. So other terms like
okay, it's up. I'm glad he said that. Let me find out exactly which slide I start talking about Cassian. And then I'll go quickly to Ambrose. Very quickly, so we can still talk about the other things. Slide 33. Here we go. So let's see what Cassian rejected, since we want to lie on his name. Let's read together. So this is what he cited. Remember Laporius' statement. It says he's twin substance, and he's saying, look, this rejects one substance in Christ. Let's see Cassian's own mouth. Cassian says, whatever was previously of double substance became of one power. Prius in the Latin. That's number one. Number two, this is in On the Incarnation, book 3. 2 books after Laporius' confession. What else is there except that we believe that God and Jesus exist in one and the same substance? The substance of God in Christ is altogether inseparable. Admit also that the person cannot be severed. Then he says one Son of God from both realities. So when he's using those words, Christ and God, in the context, he's using Nestorius' terms against him. What you're saying is Christ, what you're saying is distinct to the other nature God. They are one substance that was previously of double substance. So that's Cassian's own words. Let me go very quickly to St. Ambrose's Christology on the twin substance. This is going to be slides 51. Here we go. Here we are. So he uses the same giant analogy of twin nature. Why is this an analogy? Because Philo thinks the giants being spoken of in the Bible are angel-human compounds. They're mixtures. There's a new type of species resulting. And for Philo, that would lead to a mia fusis, according to him. Whatever constitutes in the same place, whatever's brought together in the same place constitutes one fusis. And Lactantius makes the same point, that the angels and the men together made a mixed nature. It's the mixed nature of the giants. And this is Plato. Chalcidius, he's translating Plato, and he uses this word, gemina by formica natura, the same phrase in Ambrose. Why is he using that? For a tertium naturae genus commenitus est, a third kind of nature mixed into a substance. Uh-oh. The phrase is being used for a monophysite analogy in Plato's own monophysite teachings, talking about two substances making a third substance. And this is Plato's own words without this extra phrase that Chalcidius added. Remember, Chalcidius is a contemporary of Ambrose. He compounded a third kind of substance from both, middle between them, and he constituted a mixture in the middle. He blended them into one, which is exactly what Lactantius repeats himself. He bore a midway substance between God and man and blended from both natures. One from out of two. That's the phrase in Ambrose, and that's how it's interpreted by Cassian. And to make it all the more better, the phrase that's in Ambrose isn't even Plato's own words. It's Chalcidius interpreting Plato's own words. It's a word that Chalcidius is employing to explain Plato teaching one nature from out of both. So don't lie about Cassian, and don't lie about Ambrose, and don't make these ridiculous arguments that Cyril, he talked to Celestine, Celestine talked to Leo, Leo talked to Cassian, and then Cassian, he talked to Laporius. And Laporius teaches two natures after the union. So Cassian teaches two natures after the union. So Leo teaches two natures after the union. So Celestine teaches two natures after the union. So Cyril teaches two natures after the union. So now Ephesus teaches it. Do you see how ridiculous this is? The type of jumping to conclusions you have to make that are built on fringe exegesis that's refuted in 5 minutes? It's ridiculous. He builds his ecclesiology this way, his metaphysics this way, his interpretation of any historical event. He's been refuted on this in debates. He's been refuted on this in rebuttals, and he doesn't answer any of this. Sorry if going on that tangent if we want to continue back with the video.
Yeah, people are going to think this is another 3-hour Agen Christology video. No, you're good.
Oh, you're good, Agen.
How to be used, but even the term hypostasis itself was given this treatment because hypostasis was used originally just to mean substance or essence, but then it was developed and clarified to mean particular essence, like a particular person. That's why we could have the fullness of deity, the full essence of God, but in a particular person, in a particular hypostasis. right? So they developed the vocabulary even past Nicaea because there was like this expiration date. How do we talk about these other theological concepts without differentiating between essence and nature and substance and hypostasis? So, of course, you could be making the wrong clarification. And so I'm not going to solve this today, but I will ask the audience this, just use your common sense. Is the side not in schism more capable of making the right judgment call about the clarification? Or is the schismatic side making the right clarification? The right judgment.
What even is this? Like, I don't even understand. Yeah, okay, you're schismatic and we're not in schism. Like, what is this, bro? What is this point? I don't understand.
Call on a clarification. I'm gonna say the schismatic side's probably wrong. That's my opinion.
Wow.
I leave that to you to discern.
Then you're wrong.
Now let's get into the canonical era ecclesiology, and let's talk about some non-Chalcedonian patriarchs after Chalcedon. Now, the non-Chalcedonians in Egypt had irregular elections after Timothy Salphakilos. He was the undisputed Chalcedonian patriarch for about 20 years.
Undisputed.
Because
undisputed, eh? Let's continue. Not
Timothy
yet.
the cat was never fully recognized. And in fact, when he was made a patriarch supposedly by Basilicus, even Basilicus had reneged on this. So we had Peter Mongus, another non-Chalcedonian, consecrated in secret without a synod. And he accepted the bishopric.
You know what? Let's cover this very brief point, right? So he's saying Timothy Salophakilos, I don't know if that's the proper pronunciation, he was undisputed, right? While Saint Timothy the cat or Saint Timothy Hilarius was never fully recognized. So we take a look, right? Saint John of Nicu, he relates what occurred after Timothy was exiled several times. First, upon his enthronement. Second, he was exiled to Gangra, where he spent the majority of his patriarchate. In Gangra, and this is, by the way, the same place that Saint Dioscorus was exiled initially. So there, he was writing letters to his flock, strengthening their faith and resistance against the Chalcedonians. In fact, St. Timothy's letters were so effective in restoring orthodoxy among the Chalcedonians that he was exiled even further to Kherson, which is in Ukraine. So he was exiled after he was exiled because he was so influential. Everybody loved him. So St. John of Nicu, which is a historian for the Coptic Church, he relates that the governor of the city, who used violence to the holy patriarch Timothy, was eaten by worms and died. And the inhabitants of the city said to one another, all this evil that has overtaken him is due to the judgment of the glorious and most high God, because of what has been done to the patriarch Timothy, the servant of God, in order that all men might learn that God dwells among his chosen. In Christology and the Council of Chalcedon by Father Shenouda, he says that 10,000 Orthodox believers were killed by Roman soldiers during St. Timothy's initial arrest. Additionally, so we mention, or Craig mentions Basilicus. So Basilicus was an emperor who initially sided with non-Chalcedonians. He sided with the Orthodox believers, but he later changed his mind. So when St. Timothy was restored by Emperor Basilicus and returned to Alexandria, crowds of Alexandrian citizens went to Constantinople to welcome him. So he was taken to the royal palace. Large numbers of people came to be blessed, receive healing by his hands. And an encyclical of Basilicus, if anybody knows this, was sent out throughout the empire, which condemned the tome of Leo and Chalcedon. So this is by an emperor. It was an encyclical in the, I believe, the 470s that condemned Chalcedon, and it was signed by 700 bishops. What happened to being the majority, Craig? What happened to the majority of bishops subscribing to Chalcedon? 700 bishops signed on this encyclical of Basilicus, which condemned the tome of Leo and Chalcedon. And this includes St. Peter the Fuller of Antioch, Anastasius of Jerusalem, and his synod as well. And it's important to note, unlike the Chalcedonians and the tactics they employed, the encyclical was signed in the East without compulsion. There was no pressure. There was no threat of violence. The bishops of Asia Minor, for instance, stated that if they are threatened with violence or exiled in the future, they're willing to despise such persecution for the sake of the true faith, which the encyclical promotes. This was in the 470s. Everybody, 700 bishops signed on to this encyclical in the 470s. This
Right.
meets
So-
every single. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna to strengthen your point.
Okay.
Within 20 years of Chalcedon, everybody in the East, 500 to 700 bishops, anathematized it. So what happened to the majority? What happens now? Are you going to say, well, we had the majority prior, so now 20 years later it doesn't count anymore? Okay, we had the majority prior to Chalcedon 20 years before Ephesus. We had the majority right after Ephesus too. So it just becomes anachronistic and circular. I like when we had this majority in this small era. Let's ignore when we weren't the majority here. Okay, we were majority again when we murdered everyone else, right? It becomes ridiculous.
Right.
That's actually an argument he talks about later on in the video. but we'll
Yeah.
get to that.
Well, this whole thing meets every single one of Craig's self-imposed criteria on validity of truth and whatever he's trying to say, right? We meet the standard now. Does this mean, oh, now, or at least in this period of history, we're the Orthodox Church, but after we get persecuted, we're not because we're no longer the majority? Is this what he's trying to say? It's very questionable as standard.
Let me make a point as well. Chalcedon was never accepted by everyone. How do I know that? From their own sources, Jerusalem and Alexandria, the majority of both synods rejected the council. They kicked out Juvenal for this purpose, and they didn't recognize Proterius for this purpose. From their own sources, Alexandria and Jerusalem, from the very commencement of Chalcedon, never adhered to it. Within 20 years, everything toppled over to non-Chalcedonian. So we actually had everyone for a point. You never had everyone.
Right. And Craig mentions this so-called Timothy Salophaculius, and he says, this is the real bishop. This is the real one who had the full support of the synod, the full support of the Egyptian bishops. Let's take a look at this claim. So this is from Meanderov, which is, I believe he's EO, right? He's an EO authority. He says, his successor, another Timothy called Salophaculiu, was elected and installed under the protection of what? Of imperial troops. He says he was personally moderate and charitable, qualities which were sometimes recognized even by the Monophysites. He made ecumenical attempts at reconciliation. And take a listen to this. He went to the point of restoring the name of Dioscorus in the diptychs. This is a Chalcedonian. He restored the name of Dioscorus in the diptychs. But still, the vast majority of Egyptian Christians, after what they had considered was the humiliation of their church at Chalcedon and the bloody repressions suffered from the imperial troops, would have nothing to do with him, calling him despicably the emperor's man, or in Semitic tongues, a Melkite. Is this the universally recognized patriarch Craig is telling us about? His own authority, John Meanderov, tells us otherwise. I don't know. What does that sound like? He was extremely unpopular. He was not elected by the Alexandrian Synod, and he could not compete in the slightest in terms of popularity and in terms of acceptance by the bishops against St. Timothy, who of course remained the true patriarch even in his exile. Sorry, I don't know if it's just me.
Agen,
Yeah,
the Chalcedonians got into your mic, buddy. I'm waiting for him to get to the Henoticon part.
We're almost there.
Can you guys hear?
No, you're still
your
fizzy,
microphone's
still
still not good.
I just ate, but I'm still hungry, so barbecue chicken is coming up.
It's better now?
Yes.
Yeah, you're good. You're good now.
Okay. I was just going to ask very quick, Moss, if you were Chalcedonian, to answer this very quickly. Who ordained Proterius?
Who ordained Proterius? We don't know the names of the bishops. We don't know if there were bishops. We just know he was chosen by soldiers, by imperial authority, and he was previously a deacon. That's all we know.
That's what I'm trying to tell you guys. Proterius, that's how he gets in. Paul the Jew gets in like that.
Yes.
I'm asking another question. There, Timothy, I never know how to pronounce his name either.
Salophaculiu. We don't know. We'll make it
We'll
up.
call him Sally. Timothy. Who ordained him?
No idea. No idea.
And which canon lets you just, you can be ordained by nobodies, be pressed in by the empire? Which canons say that? Oh, actually, I recall the canons explicitly saying that can't happen. That was the main critique against the Arians, that they were being put in by the emperors, and canon law forbid that.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. All right.
Of Rakot, which is a suburb of Alexandria, and there's actually letters.
Pay attention to this here. This is probably the most embarrassing part of the stream.
Secret without a reneged on this. So we had Peter Mongus, another non-Chalcedonian, consecrated in secret without a synod. And he accepted the bishopric of Rakot, which is a suburb of Alexandria, and there's actually letters he receives from his allies that call him the bishop of Rakot. So we accept that he wasn't Patriarch of Alexandria because he himself accepted that he wasn't. He accepted he's the bishop of Rakot. And so he would be later translated or moved to the Patriarch of Alexandria. And how that occurred? John Italia, the Chalcedonian, was consecrated bishop of Alexandria, but he was exiled.
I think this is good enough. Either one of you, Simple or Agen?
No, please say it.
Okay,
repeat what he said. Play it one more time,
Let's
please.
play it back a little
By
bit.
the Roman accept that letters he receives from his allies that call him the bishop of Rakot. So we accept that he wasn't Patriarch of Alexandria because he himself accepted that he wasn't. He accepted he's the bishop of Rakot.
He wasn't the Patriarch of Alexandria. He was the Patriarch of Rakot.
Oh,
So
he's not going to hear
we
the end of
expose
this.
him, before we expose him, let's just talk briefly about after Saint Timothy's death. So after Saint Timothy's death, Saint Peter Mongus was consecrated, and this was while Timothy Salophancolius was an old man. Zacharias Rhetor records that in Alexandria, not one believer would consent to hold communion with him. Right? And get ready for this. So Craig is saying about Saint Peter Mongus that he was elected in secrecy without a synod, and he was consecrated as a bishop of a suburb called Rakot rather than a patriarch. Could someone tell me what's the Coptic name?
I'm too excited. Just say it.
What's the Coptic name for Alexandria? What do we call Alexandria in Coptic?
I think it rhymes with Bakot. I'm not sure though.
Really? Really? Craig knows nothing. He knows nothing.
What did I tell you guys? He's what? What is he?
He's white.
If he just did a Google search, all it takes is a Google search. Oh, he's a bishop. Like, where did he get this information from? Where? We don't know. I tried looking on the Wikipedia. It's not there. I tried searching for his sources. I couldn't find it. Rakot is the Coptic name for the city of Alexandria. In some of our Coptic manuscripts, Saint Athanasius is called the Archbishop of Rakot. For instance, we have something called the Discourse, which Saint Athanasius, Archbishop of Rakot, pronounced concerning a passage in the Gospel of Saint Matthew. We also have another manuscript, the Discourse, which the Holy Patriarch Abba Athanasius, Archbishop of Rakot, pronounced concerning the soul and the body. If this doesn't convince you that Craig is full of nonsense and should not be taken seriously as a YouTube historian, I don't know what to tell you.
He's not going to hear the end of this.
Let's keep going. Or unless you want to add, go ahead.
Yeah, on the point of this is what I respect from the Chalcedonians. Time to be nice to Craig. They try to make it easy. So they'll put a simple canon like Apostolic Canon 74, right? The thrice summons. Or something like you need the majority of your synod from the Synod of Antioch. To make it easier for listeners, I would like to put my own canon up, which falsifies Proterius and this Timothy Sally guy. It goes by Apostolic Canon 30 or 31. If I can share my screen, or
I have it up. If
you have it?
Want to share my?
Yeah. Put it up. I just want to read it very quickly.
Okay.
For our simple-minded viewers. A very easy way to figure out this position is bogus, and this is a very easy way to tell they're schismatic. Go ahead.
With you want to, so with Apostolic Canon 31, it says, if any presbyter despising his own bishop shall collect a separate congregation and erect another altar, not having any grounds for condemning the bishop with regard to religion or justice, let him be deposed for his ambition, for he is a tyrant. In like manner, also the rest of the clergy and as many as join him and let laymen be excommunicated. Let this, however, be done after a first, second, third admonition from the bishop.
And you know the canon prior? Does anyone know the canon right before? Let me show it as well on screen. Someone read this out for me.
If any bishop obtain possession, oh yeah, we'll get there. We covered this plenty. If any bishop obtain possession of a church by the aid of the temporal powers, let him be deposed and excommunicated, and all who communicate with him as well.
We'll get there. Apparently.
It speaks for itself. It speaks for itself. Yeah. I guess we can continue now.
And so he would be later translated or moved to the Patriarch of Alexandria. And how did that occur?
He was moved, guys. He was moved from Rakot to Alexandria.
John of Talia, the Chalcedonian, was consecrated Bishop of Alexandria, but he was exiled by the Roman Emperor Zeno. So all these stereotypes that, the Chalcedonians were persecuting the non-Chalcedonians, kicking people out. The first canonical person that was actually persecuted by the church is not a non-Chalcedonian. It's a Chalcedonian, John of Talia.
Did I hear that right?
John of Tella?
No. John of Talia. We'll cover him shortly. But
I thought he
listen,
said John of Tella.
No,
I want to
he's
say
not
very
that
quickly.
bad.
I was
Go
like,
ahead.
what did he mean go from Rakot to Alexandria? Like, did he like get up from his couch and sit on the chair?
But take a listen to what he's saying.
I hope he says later John of Tella was Chalcedonian.
No.
Or
Oh,
something
we
weird
wish.
about
He
John.
just
No.
dismisses him. But
Yeah.
we'll see.
Person that was actually
So the first canonical person that was
Persecuted by the church.
persecuted.
is not a non-Chalcedonian. It's a Chalcedonian, John of Talia.
Can you
Sounds like
believe that?
John of Tella.
No, it's John of Talia. But he's saying the first person persecuted was a Chalcedonian, not a non-Chalcedonian.
So that's kind of ignominious, but it's the truth. Now, that being
But
said,
it's the truth.
he did consent to his translation to being Bishop of Nola in Italy. And the Eastern Patriarchs then accepted Peter. So, like, Peter Mongus does get regularized. I'm not
This is a bullet, but
claiming
Craig
that
doesn't
Nathan Era is
seem
this,
to
like,
realize that.
great bastion of orthodoxy, but this is how this didn't become a greater issue. The canonical patriarch just accepted what occurred, and the non-canonical bishop with a non-canonical translation got everyone's acceptance, and that regularized him. And not to
What?
anyone who's been Orthodox a long time would know that there's even with parish priests and stuff. We've seen this with Father Peter Hears with his canonical release. When there's these canonical irregularities, eventually things could be regularized over time and through everyone's consent. And this is actually what occurred with Peter Mongus.
So simple. Do you mind covering this sort of situation with John Telelea
So
and
he's
why
saying
this
Peter
is?
Mongus was canonical? Greg is saying that?
It seems so. It seems so. Yes.
Yeah, you just argued he
It
was
was
regularized.
regularized.
And
So
he made
Peter
the point.
Mongus is now valid.
Yep.
And he
Okay.
used the Father Peter here as a justification. It got regularized. It got solved at the end of the day.
His
But
name's
I
Peter.
mean, Subdeacon, what else can he do? He'd be denying history to say otherwise, of course. We know Peter Mongus was recognized. We know he was accepted as patriarch, right?
Well, we believe that.
Of
I'm
course, of
surprised he
course.
says it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's at least a glimpse of honesty, right? But simple, do you mind covering for us this whole section of John of Telelea and why this is so detrimental?
So he mocks the persecution our church has faced, which, like, basically we've gone over and over and over. So yeah, our persecution is super funny to you. Like, you didn't do anything, right? And then he egregiously attempts to argue that John of Telea was the first persecuted patriarch and he was Chalcedonian. But every single patriarch, non-Chalcedonian, Ephesian, Orthodox patriarch like Dioscorus, from the time of Chalcedon to the time of John Telea, was exiled, right? They exiled Dioscorus, they exiled Severus. They, like, it's literally like the go-to Chalcedonian move. You don't like this guy, he's gone. Search it up. You like Wikipedia, search it up. From the time we've had of Chalcedon to John of Telea, he was exiled. So John of Telea was the only patriarch of Alexandria who accepted his deposition and abdicated, recognizing that the true patriarch of Alexandria was Saint Peter Mongus. Like, if you're a Chalcedonian, you're like, okay, this is the true pope, I'm gone, I'm dipping. Your own pope said the non-Chalcedonians, their pope is right and I'm wrong. What else do you even say? That you're saying this parallel succession that's fake, our Coptic parallel succession is fake, when your own Pope says, "Oh, we're true"? Has this ever happened in the history of the church? Our Pope just says, "Yeah, you know what? My seed is it's good. I'm done. I'm gone." Like if he so most of the online like Cleve, like Subdeacon mentioned earlier, they just do this. Like he was rejoicing. He was like, "Oh, my title's so rage baity." They keep saying you're uncanonical, but they don't even know how do you mend this issue. Your Pope said the Coptic Orthodox Pope, the non-Chalcedonian Pope, is right, and then he left. He literally left. I don't like that. I don't know. If I was Eastern Orthodox, I don't even know what I would do after that.
Yes, Subdeacon, I have a question for you. Has something like this ever occurred in history where a patriarch just said, "Okay, I'm done, khalas, I'm moving to Nola. I'm going to be the bishop of Nola. I can't handle Alexandria. St. Peter Mongus can have it. Let me go retire in Rome." Has this ever happened?
Ironically, it happened with them.
It has.
So with them, they have a guy, I think early 20th century. He switches from being like Patriarch of Constantinople to Patriarch of Alexandria, or he goes back and forth. They have a guy like this in like the early 1900s. They do this stuff all the time because they're so like, yalla, it's all the same. It's all the same right everywhere. They can just go wherever they want, you know? But it's only them who does this.
It's absurdity, and it's a violation of the canons. We know that you're unable to transfer dioceses. It's forbidden. I believe it's forbidden in Chalcedon. It's forbidden, I believe, in Antioch, Nicaea.
Well, not nice. There's a synod after Antioch, I think it is.
Yes, there's several.
Eusebius of Nicomedia does it, and this is why there's a movement to stop this kind of thing. But these guys, they never stop it from the big. For more than whenever they started until now, they still do this kind of stuff. I want to get that guy's name. 1 second. You guys can talk.
No problem.
Can I
go ahead? Yeah.
This is more of a question. This is how I'm looking at it. If their side abdicated and left us in Alexandria, doesn't that just retcon the past hour of Craig's video? Like, doesn't now just restart now, and now we see whether Peter Mongus was canonically
exactly. Yeah, that's true. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Now what? Okay, so then let's stop. Alternate timeline. That's done. The 90s Mortal Kombat series is over. We're starting the 2021 with Craig.
Yeah, like, what is he fighting for? The Chalcedonian side was a true one just for you guys to give it up after all that fighting.
Yep. He's gonna skip to 518. That's where he's gonna skip to. This is the point in history where the Alexandrian parallel line is revived, as well as the Antiochian one. So there's two parallel lines. Yes, there's two of them. It ends, and then a new one begins under Justin and Justinian. And we'll get there.
Okay, Meletius the Fourth. Okay. Meletius the Fourth was both Patriarch of Alexandria and Patriarch of Constantinople. And he was Patriarch of Alexandria after. He's like, I don't want Constantinople anymore. Let me go to Alexandria now. This is Patriarch Meletius the Fourth in 1871. He died in 1935. So early 20th century he was Patriarch.
Thank you so much. I guess we'll continue now.
And so that being said, the patriarchs during the Henotic era were generally undisputed. All right. Or actually right before they were canonically regularized when there was an issue, with the exception of Rome, who didn't accept any of these people. All right. So they never got the full patriarchal acceptance, perhaps providentially so. And they were tolerant of each other until John II of Alexandria excommunicated St. Flavian II in Severus, politic to depose him. So the first strike is the first time the government persecuted one of these sides was the Chalcedonian side.
First time the government. Oh, man.
Their canonical bishop persecuted. The second strike is that even when they kind of made a peace between each other, it was the non-Chalcedonian side that broke the peace. Again, these are just facts.
These are just facts.
There was this, I would say not even an uneasy, but like an easy, like, live.
There was no Chalcedonian side, Craig.
Correct, yes.
Flavian II condemned Chalcedon.
Yes.
There was no Chalcedonian side. Go ahead.
And I'll actually, I want to add on that. So why was Flavian condemned? Why was he deposed? Why was he replaced by Saint Severus? Well, we know why. It's because he only condemned Chalcedon in name alone. He wasn't convinced in his heart. That's how high the standard was to be a patriarch in the Henoticon era. You had to affirm the Orthodox faith through your heart and with your words. So, and also this Flavian is venerated by the Chalcedonians. They call him a saint despite him through his mouth committing top tier elite takeia and condemning his own synod, condemning his own faith. They call him a saint. But
Eusebius of Nicomedia, part 2.
I do want to continue on this. So he's saying, okay, during this Henoticon era, there was peace, right? There wasn't much fighting. Each of the sides were peaceful. Now, Craig, why do you think this is? Why do you think there was relative peace during this era? Subdeacon, do you mind answering this question?
Why was there peace?
Why was there relative peace during the Henoticon era? What's so special?
Because they recanted of Chalcedon.
Yes.
If you read the Henoticon, there's two versions of it. The only difference between the two, ours and their version, is that there's an ending that they have that's longer to just say, and the Egyptians returned to the church, to make it sound like it was us who had left. But that's the only difference. And then our original version doesn't have this extra part because that's silly and stupid to say. So if you read the Henoticon, the substance of it, the 3 chapters are condemned explicitly. And it says anyone who says Christ is 2 and not 1, anytime, anywhere, even if it was at Chalcedon, says this, is anathema. So they recanted, and they entered into communion back with us. That's why Rome calls it the Acacian Schism, because they schismed at St. Acacius. Okay? These guys, they don't venerate anybody from that time. Them venerating Flavian of Antioch is illogical, based on nothing. So, because Flavian II of Antioch condemns Chalcedon. So what are you venerating him for? Just because we deposed him? So you want to venerate him?
No, his name is Flavian. And we actually killed the first Flavian, right? Except Chalcedon said we all killed Flavian.
It's like anybody, even if they were against them, even if they don't agree with them, even if they're a bad person, if they're deposed by us, these guys venerate them. It's crazy. Anyways, so the Henoticon is simply a reunion in the sense of their side repenting. It's that simple.
Subdeacon, you're precisely right, and it's unfortunate that there's a misconception that it was what's the word? It was a negotiation, or it was a middle spots between the Chalcedonians and the Orthodox. This is not the case.
The Chalcedonians ceased to exist.
Yes, exactly. The Henoticon is an Orthodox document entirely Orthodox.
Except Rome, of course. Rome existed as Chalcedon.
Yes.
But in the East, there were no
Chalcedonians. Exactly. The document itself was Orthodox. Mm-hmm. And so if you were to sign on to this document, you're contradicting the faith of Chalcedon.
Well, the Pope of Rome condemned it, right?
Exactly.
So yes. How can Craig say that he's accepting it if the Pope of Rome condemns it, and who he venerates? So the Pope of Rome is condemning this. And then on our side, the patriarchs in the East and the churches in the East who are pushing this are pushing it in light of Rome is not on the same page. Rome is not in communion. Rome is against it because Rome is upholding Chalcedon, and this is not. That's why after 518, when they drop it, they drop the Henoticon on 518 because of the Libellus of Hormisdas. They drop it. So when they drop it in 518, we continue to keep it. 536, Theodosius of Alexandria cites it in his Confession of Faith to Severus. 536, they don't use it anymore after 518.
Yeah, they have to become papists again.
Yeah.
Let's summarize very quickly. Majority. from the very conclusion of Chalcedon, who can we say rejected Chalcedon, my brothers? Who can we say with utmost certainty didn't accept the council?
Well,
If
we
any of my
can
brothers
say,
can...
so we can say Jerusalem. We didn't touch on this much, but Juvenal was chased away. He was chased out of his city. He was not accepted. We can also say Alexandria. Of course, we know we covered Dioscorus and Proteus. That's from the immediate
Exactly.
outcome.
So that's 2 synods rejecting. Good.
Yes.
Now in this Henoticon era, how many synods are rejecting the Henoticon?
Everyone but Rome. Every single one. And even before, again, we don't have to skip all the way to the Henoticon. In the 470s, under the Emperor Basilicus, we mentioned
Everyone as well.
500 bishops, right? We convened Ephesus 3. I don't remember how many bishops attended that council, but they all affirmed the Orthodox faith, right? So it's so ironic to me that the times in history, in antiquity, where there was peace, where persecution was rare, was when all the churches were united under Orthodoxy. Is that a coincidence, right? Craig is trying to go ahead.
And notice the theological implications. I always love to tie this. For Craig, he says verbatim in this stream, the Ephesian language had an expiration date. Are you kidding me? Your arbitrary expiration date is why 30,000 are being murdered? Your arbitrary expiration date is why there's all these problems in the church? Even though they concede, he said it to me in the debate, that the one nature Christology itself is orthodox. That's why he held the number one, the finger, if you remember that, Subdeacon, in the thumbnail. He's holding up a number 1 finger for the one nature. After all that, and then we find times of peace for Christological articulation you accept, and you're still Chalcedonian? Are you serious? What's going on here?
I just want to reiterate one more time for the audience to know. The Henoticon era marked the end of the parallels. They ceased to exist by this period. They ceased to exist. Why? Because the church was reunited under Orthodoxy. If anyone wants to add anything before we continue.
Yeah, this is like 2 reset points. We had Peter Mongus, the former abdication.
Yes.
Now we have the Henoticon. 2 times were justified and you're conceding it. Now he has to restart his argument. He just wasted the entire stream. Why don't you start from this later point when the schism and the rival patriarchates are actually solidified? He's conceding his side died out. They went to non-existence. And then they had to reestablish rival patriarchates. So he has to keep creating this burden. Dioscorus was canonically deposed. Then he has to create another burden. Well, Peter Mongus was canonically deposed. And then for the Antiochian line, well, Severus was canonically deposed. The burden becomes greater, and his interpretation of the primary sources becomes dumber, and dumber. Let's continue.
All right.
Let live attitude that even into communes until John II of Alexandria excommunicated St. Flavian, until Severus deposed him, right? Otherwise, he was not bothering anybody. Now, hyper-non-Chalcedonians broke this uneasy truce of the Henoticon, but even then, they were able to selectively accept Chalcedonian communion. So they're kind of inconsistent, and we'll get into this in a second. But I just want to bring up that the days of peace between these both sides wasn't as long as the whole Henoticon era. At best, it's 25 years. So that's worth pointing out. So let's talk about the non-Chalcedonian saints, which were in communion with Chalcedonians. Now, St. Flavian II of Antioch, who's a Chalcedonian, was in communion with John I of Alexandria, non-Chalcedonian. And I, just in case, because it's kind of hard to find a line, I actually put his saints like.
How was Flavian a Chalcedonian, Craig? How? So he says anathema to Chalcedon. Flavian says that. Okay, how is he a Chalcedonian?
It's his heart, bro.
By the way, Subdeacon, this isn't just our side saying this. This is recorded by the Chronicle of Theophanes the Confessor. I'm 99% sure Theophanes is a Chalcedonian. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
This is what he says.
Yeah.
After holding a synod of the bishops under him, he wrote a lengthy letter in which he supported the synods of Nicaea, Constantinople, and Ephesus, but remained silent about that of Chalcedon. He renounced Diodorus and Theodore and subjoined 4 chapters wherein he appears not to be in agreement with the Synod of Chalcedon and in particular rejects the phrase in 2 natures.
Oof.
Uh-oh, you venerate this guy. Theophanes continues saying, some say that these chapters were the work of Acacius of Constantinople, but Flavian wrote a private letter to Anastasius supporting the latter's purpose. He performed taqiyya. he said these words. He rejected the two natures. He rejected Chalcedon with mouth alone. Yet he was still condemned. He was still deposed. He was still replaced by Saint Severus. You call him a saint.
And they have to recognize, by the way, like his own deposition. They have to. Whatever side you take it, if you're conceding he factually rejected in two natures, his duplicity alone is enough for a deposition on both sides.
All right. Let's continue these other two examples.
He is a saint. And John I and his deacon Dioscorus II, who later became Pope of Alexandria, and he's a saint, in 497 were open communion with Rome if their own synodical letter was accepted. So I will only briefly get into detail, but they said the Toma Leo in Latin, we hear from the Bishop of Thessalonica.
He's saying the Dioscoros who wrote the letter of 497 to the Synod of Rome, he's a saint for them?
Not too sure.
You put it in parentheses.
It's impossible. It doesn't make any sense. I'm assuming this is either an error.
He's talking about Saint Dioscorus II of Racote, not of Alexandria.
Oh, okay. I forgot about that.
Great point. And Subdeacon, I believe you were on the stream covering the letter to Rome.
Yeah.
Okay. This is what he's referencing.
Heretical, unlike the Greek.
Just take a listen to this. Sorry.
We'll only briefly get into detail, but they said the Toma Leo in Latin, we hear from the Bishop of Thessalonica, isn't heretical, unlike the Greek of Chalcedon. So here's our Christological confession. If you accept it, we can have communion. So you can see Toma Leo wasn't a deal breaker for two more saints.
The Tome of Leo wasn't a deal breaker for these guys.
Of the Orthodox, John I and Dioscorus II.
Okay, first of all, Dioscoros II, that he put that in. He put two I's and made it the second. That Dioscoros was a priest. He was a presbyter in the Synod of Alexandria. He wasn't the patriarch. Okay, he was representing. He was a legate of Alexandria to write the letter to the Synod of Rome. The letter does not say the Latin wasn't heretical, Craig. How come you don't give us quotes?
Never. This video is so empty of quotes.
It says that the Greek. Look how he's doing this is I'm very disappointed. I'm very disappointed, Greg. The Greek, he says, was the letter says, because it was translated by Theodoret the heretic, who their side calls blessed. Therefore, he could have made it sound more Nestorian than it is. So they're asking Rome, maybe the original doesn't. They're not saying it doesn't. They're saying maybe. Let's talk about it. Us and you, we'll figure it out together. They never say it's not. They just say the Greek is for sure. We want to see the original.
Yes. And this is all based on the words of a certain deacon. He tries to claim this is a bishop. No, it was a deacon named Photius of Thessalonica who claimed that the tome in its original language is in line with Nicaea. It wasn't Dioscorus who said this. It wasn't John I who said this. It was a deacon from Thessalonica, and this gave hope. This gave hope to these two figures. It gave them hope that perhaps there is a chance that we need to see the original language. Perhaps there is a chance that this was a mistranslation.
Bro, okay. Not only that, what we just said, he created a historical character. He created him. He made him, and he canonized him. He made, and he gave him second, Dioscorus the second, after ours, the first who was that Chalcedon was against. Dioscorus the first. So then he's recognizing even the first by calling this one the second. There has to be a first if you call him a second, right? So he's recognizing that one. He's creating a whole new one, saying he's the second, canonizing him, and saying he was the Pope of Alexandria. This is like hadith la'if.
All right,
Alright.
keep going.
Let's continue his third claim of our saints being in communion with them.
And John II initially had communion with St. Flavian II, though it's worth pointing out he then broke it because he was a more severe non-Chalcedonian or a more adamant non-Chalcedonian. Now, Severus of Antioch, who had Flavian II deposed, interestingly enough, was in communion with Timothy I Constantinople. Now, Timothy I Constantinople accepted Severus's non-Chalcedonian anathemas, but he also simultaneously accepted Chalcedon.
Wrong.
Which we could see why Rome would not be in communion with Timothy I of Constantinople, but then it begs the question, how could Severus be in communion that it was someone who's accepting Chalcedon?
All right, so let's cover this very quickly on the character of Timothy I of Constantinople and Subdeacon. I don't remember which video it was. I don't remember which stream it was. But Erhan referenced this. He didn't reference Timothy I of Constantinople by name, but he referenced a specific figure being in communion with
I
Saint
implied
Severus.
it was him.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I just want to address this. So it's true that initially Timothy would not condemn Chalcedon, and he allegedly condemned those who condemned Chalcedon when pressured to do so in front of a Chalcedonian monk. But he denied this matter in front of the emperor and anathematized Chalcedon later. Scholarship refers to him as Timothy, get this, Timothy the Miaphysite Patriarch of Constantinople. This is scholarship speaking. And evidence of his conviction we take from the Trisagion controversy.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not
so
sure. Go ahead.
Go ahead. So
I'm not sure what they keep talking about, these guys. I don't know if they're making up people like Craig just did with Dioscoros II, or they're actually referring to like real people who they are not aware of repented, like Acacius, Timothy, Anthimus. These are all patriarchs of Constantinople,
right,
who became Orthodox.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Likely the latter, but we can never know what's going on in their heads, right?
Yeah, we can.
But
they're
so
watching
evidence
too much anime or whatever they do. These guys.
Maybe so. So evidence of the conviction again comes from the Trisagion controversy, because he enforced who was crucified for us into all Constantinople churches, and scholars say this is for two reasons. Number one, in order to emphasize the Miaphysite character of his church, and second, to distinguish himself from his Chalcedonian predecessor, Macedonius II. So Timothy the Miaphysite was, Timothy of Constantinople was a Miaphysite. Again, number one, he condemned Chalcedon in front of the emperor, and number two, he was a supporter of the Trisagion and used it as a Miaphysite distinction. I believe that's everything. Next, we'll see what Craig has in store for us. This is really bad for Craig.
So, fact of the matter is, Chalcedon is not the deal breaker that people claim it is if we have non-Chalcedonian saints in communion with Chalcedonians.
We don't.
So that's worth pointing out. And to some degree, non-Chalcedonianism isn't the sort of deal breaker that some people think it is with the Chalcedonian side in communion with them. Even St. Photius, which we have a whole other video on. Perhaps not very prudently, by the way, but worth pointing out, this occurred with both side saints. Now, let's talk about court non-Chalcedonianism and their canonicity. Now, we never talk about this because this is sort of stereotype that the non-Chalcedonians were
not prudently
the royalist side, but that's totally not true. We saw with Zeno,
he just conceded his own
canonical patriarch for the issue of Chalcedon.
What a mess.
Yes, there was political machinations in favor of non-Chalcedonianism, and there was
like
a
I need
whole
to clean my room
royalist faction among the non-Chalcedonians.
Good
so
point.
let's talk about this. There was an end of piece brought, the end of this piece really started by Severus, brought disputed depositions and elections between Chalcedonians and court non-Chalcedonians. The piece, like I said, already ended during the Henoticon. And so there was a lot of people who are non-Chalcedonian, but the ones you only hear about are the court side, the ones that actually had the favor of the royalty in Constantinople. And those people were the minority of non-Chalcedonians. My personal opinion is because the main impetus behind non-Chalcedonianism was resistance to the Roman Empire. So
we'll refute this later.
Of course, the side that's non-Chalcedonian that is collaborationist of the Roman Empire is going to be the less popular side, but we'll get to more details. Now, Severian patriarchs all eventually were put under house arrest, but I want to mention they were protected also in Constantinople. We'll get into details.
He's getting this from Jonathan Moss's book.
Oh, yes, correct. He does quote from this. Yes.
That guy, I mean, it's like it's original research, but it's very liberal.
It's really bad. Yes.
Very, very liberal.
He tries to. I believe Agen, you know about this. He tries to argue some sexuality thing. and Saint Severus. You know what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
talking about?
He was like, Saint Severus doesn't believe in gender or something. Like, bro,
You
like,
know what I'm
this
talking
scholar
about?
is ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that book.
Yes, we'll continue.
Details of how they're
No, this
protected.
part is great.
Severus
You'll love this.
Antioch and Themis of Constantinople and Theodosius of Alexandria are examples of these men. Now it begs the question: were they controlled opposition? Right, like they are the royalist non-Chalcedonians. Are they kind of like controlled opposition, like
What did you
like
have
Shapiro
written?
and Sean Hannity? You know, are they controlled opposition like the Mossad and Hamas?
What is this?
Would anyone like to say anything on this?
No, he cooked us. He cooked us.
You know about this? Hamas was bolstered by the Mossad, the Israeli intelligence, because they were the religious fanatics vis-a-vis the Palestinian Liberation
is
Organization,
bro
which were a
talking
secular
about?
communist.
Well,
based
at least
resistance to
honestly,
Israel.
at least Craig
So
isn't a
sometimes-
Zionist, so that's good.
I guess.
side that's against you will pick one of the two sides that are in opposition to them to weaken them, right? And so were these royalist non-Chalcedonians bolstered by Constantinople, the weakened non-Chalcedonianism? I pose a question. I'm not exactly sure, but it's worth considering.
No, it's not.
Let's talk about divide and conquer versus consolidate and reconcile. Now, you could say, well, if they're controlled opposition, perhaps it's part of the divide and conquer strategy, that we could divide the different non-Chalcedonians, get a group we like, and then because they're all splintered, we could take them out one piece at a time, right? Kind of like
You
what
could
the
tell
FBI did in the 60s.
Dyer
to
had
British.
a really
But
strong
there's this other way to
effect
look
on his
at what they did in
conspiracy level
Constantinople. Was this
thinking.
consolidate
Eh?
and reconcile?
Bro,
And
who
I
is-
think it was consolidate and
is
reconcile.
divided
Try to make a
into
group
parts?
of people that are less
Us
crazy and
or
try to bring
them?
them together. And it's easier to talk turkey with
I don't
this
know.
group of reasonable people, and then we can all
You're all
reconcile
one.
versus a bunch of raving
There
lunatics.
are a bunch
that
of
reconcile
different
each group of raving
factions.
lunatics. That's much more difficult. So the quote Hardy in his article, why did Justinian
Cyrillian
tolerate, or if not,
Orthodoxy
in fact,
says Chalcedon was a psyop. It was a psyop. Absolutely.
patronize, right? Same
Look at
Theodora,
everything that
court
came out of
non-Chalcedonianism,
Chalcedon.
is what he writes. After a while, the emperor was perhaps not unwilling that the two such sources of power as the loyalty of the Egyptians to their church and the wealth of the city of Alexandria should be in different hands. The Copts, of course, controlled the lesser but considerable resources of dioceses, monasteries, and parish churches outside of Alexandria. We need not ascribe to Justinian a deliberate plan to divide and rule, but he may well have calculated that since the total suppression of the monophysites was unlikely, it was better to keep their leaders in some kind of touch with himself than to drive them into complete opposition. And that's why I think with St. Theodora and Justinian, they're playing good cop, bad cop. And the whole plan all along was to consolidate and to limit
I
the
love
actions
this
of
boy.
non-Chalcedonians. And when they did, as we're going to see, did act and consecrate people to try to do it outside the Roman Empire. And there's canonical reasons for this. That's why I don't think even Theodora is a non-Chalcedonian. I think she
Yep.
I don't
Yep.
think. Oh, simple. You're ready
Yep.
for this part, yeah?
Yep.
So one more time. I don't
so
think
crazy.
Theodora is a non-Chalcedonian. Let's
she's a
continue.
Chalcedonian saint for good reason.
I
She was
think she's a Chalcedonian saint for good reason,
working with St. Justinian to reconcile the non-Chalcedonians.
because she's working with Justinian to
Right,
reconcile
through
them. All right, simple. You wanna refute this point?
Yeah. So basically, for those of you who don't know, Saint Theodora, she was a Miaphysite. They have to make up the fact that she's a Chalcedonian based on zero evidence because she was the wife of their so-called Saint Justinian, and having a wife that opposes you in every regard of your faith doesn't look too good if you're a Chalcedonian. So some scholars do argue that Justinian and Theodora were working together, but the most consensus is that scholars generally assume that Theodora was an ardent, a very, very strong non-Chalcedonian or Miaphysite, very, very strong. So this is literally this claim that Theodora was a Chalcedonian completely made up, and it's literally to get around the fact. Yeah, she was like Kadu said, she was literally the daughter of a Miaphysite priest. She was friends, and we'll go into like how she even approved of Miaphysite bishops. But
I think there are some traditions that say she was even ethnically Assyrian. I have to find them.
I'm not sure, but yeah, that would be great. They have to do all of this though, guys, to get around the fact that they venerate another non-Chalcedonian, another heretic. They venerate her. They venerate her. She is a saint for them. So someone called Procpus, right, in his Anecdota, who hated Theodora, and he tries to make her look horribly. She claims that he claims that Theodora and Justinian divided Christianity. And he says that her Oriental Orthodox conviction was both politically expedient, so it was good for politics, and it was an apt choice, a good choice because she was morally corrupt. So basically, this guy, he wasn't Oriental Orthodox. He hated her, and he says she was Oriental Orthodox. She loved the Miaphysites. So even the scholar Susan Harvey says on his Anecdota, as a piece of historical writing, it provides an almost wholly fabricated view of Justinian and Theodora, useful in the study of the development of rhetorical method and cultural themes, but little substance. So basically, this whole idea that Craig's like, oh, I think they were, I don't know, Mossad and Hamas, and he goes into like how like Hamas made Mossad, or Mossad made Hamas. I don't like, this is not comparable. Scholarship doesn't even give this weird conspiracy theory credit. Evagrius Scholasticus, who was a Chalcedonian, he was unsure, right? He even suspected himself that Theodora was like doing strange things and helping the Miaphysite, but he just said, like Craig said, he was like, oh, they're probably like, you know, he knew what he was doing. His wife's like literally opposing him, but he knows what he's doing. So it's just embarrassing, right? We have more evidence of this, and it's more. You have the Chronicle of 819, the Chronicle of Zunkin, the Chronicle of Jacob of Edessa, Michael the Syrian, John of Niku. All of these chronicles, and these are non-Chalcedonian sources that say she was a strong Miaphysite believing believer. And some claimed that, like Kadus just said, she was the daughter of a Miaphysite priest, and then always an Orthodox Christian. Right, and all of these chronicles have various sources, like Pseudo Zacharias Rector, but primarily John of Ephesus, a contemporary of Theodora. He cites this. He's an ardent historian, and even Craig cites him a lot in his in this video later on. John of Ephesus, he talks about Theodora serving the Oriental Orthodox community a ton. She was their protector. She helped us. She hit us when Justinian was crashing out for no reason, was trying to kill all of us. Theodora gladly helped us with the Persian queen to store us and help us live under Persian rule. That's also a reason why the Syrian Orthodox had such a great grounding in Persia, because of Queen Theodora. When Al-Harith ibn Jaballah, sorry, I butchered that a little, petitioned Theodora.
Yeah.
He told Theodora, why are there no Orthodox priests, Oriental Orthodox, Miaphysite priests in the Eastern territories because of the fierce persecutions, right? She immediately gave the orders and the means that gave way to Miaphysite patriarch, the Miaphysite bishop consecrated Jacob Bardaeus. And surprisingly enough, this is extremely damaging, because Jacob Bardaeus is the same person that Craig will say is uncanonical. So your saint approved an uncanonical bishop. But anyway, she hid a bunch of Miaphysite Orthodox who were exiled and persecuted by Justinian, like Severus, Theodosius, Anthimus of Constantinople, in her own palace, right? The palace of Hormisdas. Severus is someone whom she even met before she was married to Justinian in Egypt during her early adulthood.
Your mic is Chalcedonian, bro.
Oh, my bad, my bad.
All right, I'll continue for now until Simple rejoins.
Your mic is Chalcedonian too, Moss. What's going on?
I think his is fine. I think it's just internet problem.
My connection?
Yeah, it could be.
You're good.
All of you guys.
Subdeacon, I think it's your end.
Okay. All right.
Okay, Simple, are you back? Simple?
Let's just keep the video playing.
So I'll continue. We're almost done on the topic of Empress Theodora. So so we can list tons and tons of examples, right? But the most important one is her own baptism. So there's a certain Orthodox named Orthodox stylite named Zura, and he was forced down a pillar by Chalcedonians. So he went all the way to Constantinople, furious and demanding peace, demanding justice. He was cursing Chalcedon. And all of his actions at the court in Constantinople warranted the death penalty under Justinian's law. and it caused Justinian to throw a tantrum against Zura, shouting insults at him. But Justinian couldn't do anything because Zura was very popular among the people. So eventually, Zura baptized Empress Theodora, right? So we have a stylite, an Orthodox stylite, baptizing the Empress after she was already Christian. What does that mean exactly? Because we know Empress Theodora was Christian prior to this. We know this. So how could she have been baptized after the matter by this so-called Zura, by the stylite? What does that mean? What indication does that give? Right? We can keep going. There's the story of Marai the Solitary, same sort of situation. And also, Theodora had 2 children prior to her marriage with Justinian, a son and a daughter. We know nothing of their personal religious convictions. However, we know that 2 of her grandsons adhered to Orthodoxy. One of them, a monk named Athanasius, was even taken into consideration as a candidate for the vacant patriarchal see of Alexandria. So even her own grandchildren are Orthodox. What does this say, right? And all these examples are, you know, proof that she served and she adhered to the Orthodox Church. It disproves these made-up claims that she was Chalcedonian by conviction, which not even her own opponents would claim. Nobody made the positive claim, except for Craig, that she was Chalcedonian. Some would say she was, you know, she was taken the side to keep peace. Some might say they were unsure, but nobody made the positive claim that she was Chalcedonian, except for Craig. Where did he get it from? Nobody knows. So, like, just to conclude all of this,
he got it from the Hamburglar and Grimace.
The Hamburglar and Grimace. There we go. And to conclude all of this on Theodora, I just pose a question to Craig. Why is Empress Theodora a saint in your tradition? What has she done for your church, for your bishops, for your priests, for your clergy, for your congregation? What has she done to be a saint? We don't know. We don't know.
I think this would be a good place to pause and continue this for another part. We can do this in multiple parts. That way we don't bore everyone here. So yeah, next, I think the next topic is going to start with St. Severus. That'll be a good place to start. Let's talk amongst each other next time to meet all together. We might have more people if they're able to make it. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Let us know if you guys want to see more things after this, but we're going to focus on completely finishing and demolishing all of Craig's arguments in his video. So I think we can honestly finish this in one more part. If we need another one, we'll be able to do that as well. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you for bearing with us. Thank you, Moss, for the presentation. Thank you, Subdeacon and Simple, for making time. I'll put your guys' channels in the description, and I'll also send the collaboration link. But yeah, thank you guys for coming to this.
I just want to mention that real quick. Sorry, that this is usually people complain that our videos are too long, is because they just run through everything, make up stuff, and we have to spend the time dedicated to these topics to actually go through and show you what the truth is. Because if we just like glossed over it, oh, they're wrong, nobody would get substance out of it. So that's why this is going in, and really like a lot of work goes to Moss. Moss worked really hard on this, so thanks again to him. And yeah, I hope everyone can tune in next time, because if you go ahead and watch Craig's video, give him the views, because the next stuff that he says is crazy, and Kyle picks it up and he just runs with it. So there's a lot coming. That's all I gotta say.
Okay, guys.
Any last things? All set?
That's everything.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll continue this another time. Thank you guys for watching. God bless everyone.
Thank you so much.
God bless.
Bye-bye.